This is Dr. Narco Longo with the Florida Department of Magic. Around the year 360 BC, a Greek philosopher by the name of Plato committed to record the foundational account for the legend of Atlantis. From the depths of the Mediterranean to the highest peaks of South America, man has largely searched in vain ever since for the remnants of that phantom empire. On this channel, we have even entertained and largely substantiated the notion that the Florida peninsula was one of its major epicenters. Evidence for such would include the world's largest concentration of ancient megalithic ship anchors, known as Saxer Stones, which can be found in the exact vicinity of the most Greek city in the Americas, Tarpon Springs, Florida. Keep in mind, Atlantis is a Greek myth. In addition to the multitude of Greek words contained within ancient Indian toponyms, the abnormally tall natives of the American Southeast can be firmly linked to ancient Greeks, not only linguistically and culturally, but genetically. It is difficult to fathom that the Greek Pantheon was inspired by anything other than the lightning capital of the world, the hurricane capital of the world, the seashell capital of the world, the highest concentration of freshwater springs in the world, the sinkhole capital of the world, the fishing capital of the world, the boating capital of the world, and the shark attack capital of the world. Renowned American psychic Edgar Cayce also fingered Bimini, a small island off the Florida coast, as a central hall of records for Atlantis, which was supported by the subsequent discovery of the Bimini Road in 1968. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is another commonly proposed location, but Plato tells us the greater Atlantean continent was larger than Africa and the Middle East combined, not a narrow chain of presupposed islands. Flat and fertile, Florida's prehistoric coastline identically matches the dimensions given by Plato for the great southern plain of Atlantis, measuring 555 kilometers north to south and 370 kilometers east to west, per 11,600 years ago. The fact that the horse is universally recognized as having quote-unquote evolved in the United States over millions of years ago, to the point of near domestication, then disappeared in the precise time frame for Plato's catastrophic fall of Atlantis, 9,600 BC, only to appear in Eurasia a mere few thousand years ago, fully prepped for domestication, serves as an archaeological nail in the coffin for any and all clinging to a Mediterranean, South American, Pacific, or even Northern European homeland for the Atlanteans. And thus we arrive at the topic of tonight's presentation: elephants. In addition to confirming the presence of horses in the Atlantean homeland, Plato's detailed account assures us that elephants abounded there too. Such a criteria has been conveniently avoided by researchers, as it immediately disqualifies nearly every popular candidate for the island and continent of Atlantis. However, the presence of elephants further bolsters the case for Florida, together with the greater American continent. For those unaware, Florida is widely considered the mecca of mastodon, mammoth, and American elephant fossils. It should not surprise us to find out that the largest living elephant herd in the Western Hemisphere is today found in Florida. Miami Beach was actually built by elephants. In this video, we will uncover the hidden history of elephants in Florida and ancient America by examining things like first-hand reports of living and breathing American Proboscideans, Native American cryptozoology, the pertinent opinions of Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln, their use in the American Civil War, the Ringling Circus being headquartered in Florida, the fact that all 7 of the Ringling brothers were master masons of the Scottish Rite, the Republican Party mascot, their use as emblems in the American Southeast, and the archaeological findings of Florida, which overwhelmingly support an Atlantean connection. The views expressed in this video do not necessarily reflect my own. Now enjoy.
Welcome to Florida, baby.
Introducing Dr. Narco Longo.
Part 1. The Elephants of Atlantis. The following comes to us from Irish author Tony O'Connell, the creator of Atlantopedia. Quote, "Elephants are specifically mentioned by Plato as being indigenous to Atlantis. This must have significance for anyone trying to arrive at a credible location for Atlantis. For example, supporters of the Theron Atlantis school cannot show where such large animals could have lived on the small volcanic island. There are no physical remains, no frescoes, and no historical references. Rodney Castleton, who supports the Minoan hypothesis, admits that, quote, no raw elephant ivory has been found on Thera, and very little in the way of worked ivory. He later speaks of the importation of ivory into Crete, having bravely denounced Plato's description of herds of elephants on Atlantis as, quote, false. Similarly, Spenuth's Heligoland location would have been climatically unsuited to elephants. Spenuth himself admits that the elephant reference, quote, is hard to explain. Nevertheless, Felice Vinci, who champions a Northern European origin for Greek mythology, believes that Plato's elephant reference may be a lingering memory of the woolly mammoths that inhabited Arctic regions as recently as 2500 to 2000 BC. In the late 17th century, Olaf Rudbeck, recognizing the problem that Plato's reference to elephants presented for his Swedish Atlantis, argued that Plato had been speaking figuratively when describing the large voracious animals and had actually been referring to wolves, the Swedish word for wolf being ulf, which sounds like the beginning of elephant. Elephants in Western Europe were undoubtedly represented by mammoths, remains of which have been recovered from the North Sea, Doggerland, and dated to around 40,000 years ago. Coincidentally, a tool made of mammoth bone used for making rope has also been dated to 40,000 years ago. This discovery, by Nicholas Conrad from the University of Tübingen, was made shortly after Ashley Coe published his interesting book on the history of rope making. Further information on string, ropes, and knots was published in March 2017. This ingenuity of our very distant ancestors, so often underestimated, is slowly being revealed by modern archaeology. In the year 2000, in the Czech Republic, it was discovered that woven cloth was being produced on looms 27,000 years ago. A few years later, a team from Harvard's Peabody Museum reported the discovery of fibers that were spun, twisted, or knotted, and dated to at least 34,000 years ago. 2020 saw evidence emerge which suggested that even as far as back as 41,000 to 52,000 years ago, the Neanderthals had mastered the making of cords. Later the same year, further evidence was offered that string making may have begun even earlier. Allied to the demise of the Siberian mammoths is the often repeated fib that when the remains were first discovered, their flesh was still fresh enough to eat, which has recently been debunked by Jason Colavito. He has also unearthed the truth behind that other canard, relating to a Siberian mammoth, namely that fresh buttercups were found in its mouth. He has now traced back the earliest reference to the frozen mammoths to George Cuvier in 1822. If we pause here, I would like to reference a short clip from the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, in which a man claimed to have eaten mammoth meat.
And I win the chili cook-off every year. You throw a little mammoth meat in that chili.
Have you ever eaten mammoth meat?
Oh, yeah.
What?
Yep.
You ate it?
Yeah.
What? How old was it?
We didn't carbon date it, but it's got to be at least 12,000 years old.
So you found physical tissue, like muscle and tissue, and you cooked it?
I have a friend up there that found a full woolly mammoth. You asked if I ate woolly mammoth before. Had a little bit of a barbecue.
Jesus.
A lot of Jack Daniels and shit like that went down.
Now explain what condition the meat was in. Was it frozen solid?
No, not by the time we ate it.
Right, but when he found it,
Oh, yeah.
it was frozen solid.
Yes, sir.
And so he just thaws it out, and
Once it's out of the permafrost, it starts melting.
then what was it like?
Yeah.
Like a steak?
Oh, fuck no. Like a shoe leather.
Well, of course, they're very thick.
You got to
strong
saute.
animal.
You got to put them in some kind of. You got to let them soak into some kind of marinade.
Did you have any apprehension about eating a 20,000-year-old mammoth?
Not after the first few drinks.
How much of it did you guys cook?
It wasn't very much. He sold the whole animal to a collector. Got close to $500,000 for it.
Wow. And so how does one even transport? Do you have to refreeze it? Like, what do you do?
I think the buyer just wanted the bones. He wanted the skeleton.
Oh.
Because the skeleton of a woolly mammoth is very expensive. You're talking about tusks.
But wouldn't that tissue be very valuable?
I'm not the only guy around that's eating mammoth up there.
What?
It's.
Is that a small club of you guys?
I don't know if it's a small club. We don't recognize it in each other, but it's you got no choice. You find a woolly mammoth with meat on it, you're going to have to eat some of it. You just have to.
Why?
What's the point if you don't?
Edgar Cayce, in a forthcoming book, advocates a northwest European location for Atlantis, and suggests that where Plato referred to elephants, he actually meant deer. Cayce offers as a simple explanation for this seemingly daft contention the fact that the Greek word for elephant, elephas, is very similar to the Greek elaphos, which means deer. He claims that a simple transcription error by a scribe could have caused the mix-up. The elk was the largest species of deer to be found in the northern hemisphere, and is still to be found in Scandinavia. The great Irish deer, which died out around 5,500 BC, had an antler span of 11 feet, and a maximum height of 10 feet, though usually less. The tallest African elephant ever recorded was 13 feet at the shoulder, which would appear to give the elephant the edge over the deer height-wise. Furthermore, it is worth pointing out again that Plato described his elephants as the, quote, largest and most voracious animal. So when we realize that an adult elephant eats 250 to 300 pounds a day, while a moose manages on 40 to 60 pounds a day, there seems to be no contest. Gene Matlock, in an attempt to bolster his Mexican location for Atlantis, has suggested that Plato's elephants were in reality the long-snouted tapirs, or tapirs, of Mesoamerica, an idea borrowed from Hyde Clark. While the elephant issue should not be dealt with in isolation, it does serve to illustrate the difficulties involved in analyzing Plato's text. Consider the possibility that the early date of 9,600 BC for Atlantis is accepted, then the islands that are too small today to accommodate elephants may have been considerably larger and sometimes connecting to each other, or a mainland during the Ice Age, when sea levels were lower and consequently capable of supporting pachyderms. In this regard, Sunderland would have been the most suitable candidate. Not only would today's South China Sea archipelagos have been a single landmass, but there would have been access to the region from the Asian mainland, home today to large numbers of elephants. Strangely enough, even the Andes, considered by some as the home of Atlantis, reveal the fact that during the last ice age, a species of elephant called Cuvieronius lived there but became extinct around 8,000 BC. These animals are to be found carved on the Great Gateway of the Sun in Tiahuanaco, suggesting that they were common in the region. Supporters of an Atlantis link with Tiahuanaco have highlighted this fact. James Bailey, who supports the idea of Atlantis in America, believes that Plato's mention of elephants could be a reference to the American mammoth, generally believed to have died out circa 10,000 BC, although Victor von Hagen, the American explorer, contentiously maintained that they survived as late as 2000 BC. A similar idea was presented at the 2005 Atlantis Conference by the American researcher Monique Peterson. The Schups, in support of their theory of Atlantis in the Black Sea region, contend that Indian elephants existed there until 800 BC, and support this with a reference to the Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose III, who killed 120 elephants there around 1200 BC, which is a strange claim as Thutmose did not venture beyond Syria, and he died circa 1426 BC. Elephas antiquus is a dwarf species whose remains have been found throughout the islands of the Mediterranean, from Sardinia to Cyprus. All those found were dated 200,000 BC or earlier. In sharp contrast, Simon Davis, in an article in New Scientist, dated January 3, 1985, dated Mediterranean dwarf elephants to as recent as 6,000 BC. Some writers, such as Roger Coghill, have tried to use the pygmy elephant as an explanation for Plato's text, where we find that he describes the elephant as being, of its nature, the largest and most voracious. This is not a description of pygmy elephants. Victoria Louise Harridge is a paleontologist at the Natural History Museum in London. She has published a lengthy paper in 2 parts, offering an in-depth technical study of dwarf elephant species found on Mediterranean islands. However, Gar Hassan, or Hassan's Cave in southeast Malta, has Paleolithic cave paintings that depict elephants, indicating more recent contact with the animals. Whether these represented full-sized or the pygmy variety is unclear. A small booklet by Dr. Anton Mifsud and Charles Savanaventura describes this cave system. In Dossier Malta-Neanderthal, Mifsud has drawn attention to another cavern not far away, formerly known as Gar Dulam, now Gar Dalam, where thousands of dwarf elephant bones were discovered. Dulam means small elephant in Arabic. This is one of the mainstays of his Atlantis and Malta theory. Whether these diminutive creatures justify Plato's description that they were the, quote, largest and most voracious of animals is clearly debatable. For me, this is not a description of pygmy elephants, and so in all probability is an indication of a North African location, or, as some claim, an Asian one. The Atlanteans had control in Europe as far as Tyrrhenia and Egypt, which would have included what is now modern Tunisia, the home of the last recorded wild elephants in that region. The exact extent of Egyptian-controlled territory in Libya at the time of Atlantis is unclear. We do know that, quote, in the mid-13th century, Marmarica was dominated by an Egyptian fortress chain stretching along the coast as far west as the area around Marsa, Matra. By the early 12th century, Egypt claimed overlordship of Cyrenaican tribes as well. At one point, a ruler chosen by Egypt was set up briefly over the combined tribes of Meshwesh, Libu, and Soped. Pedia map suggests that the Egyptian New Kingdom control stretched at least halfway towards Syrtis Major, which has been proposed by some as the location of Atlantis. Readers should be aware that there is general acceptance that the North African elephant inhabited the Atlas Mountains until they became extinct in Roman times. The New Scientist magazine of February 7, 1985, outlined the evidence that Tunisia had native elephants until at least the end of the Roman Empire. H.R. Stahel, in Atlantis Illustrated, is the only commentator that I have encountered who suggests that elephants were used in the construction of the magnificent buildings described by Plato. This would make sense, as Stahel calculated that surrounding the city of Atlantis, quote, the aggregate length of the walls was almost 50 miles. They were 50 feet broad and twice as high. To build them, and their gates and towers, was a feat as impressive as the construction of the canals. The quantity of stone required was roughly 27 times that used in an Egyptian pyramid. In Elephant Destiny, Martin Meredith records that one of the earliest references to the African elephant came from Hanno, the 5th century BC Carthaginian explorer, who related how he came across marshes at the foot of the Atlas Mountains which, quote, were haunted by elephants and multitudes of other grazing beasts. Meredith also mentions that stables for as many as 300 elephants were to be found within the city of Carthage itself. Nevertheless, the species of elephant used by Hannibal has been a source of debate for years. The Numidians of North Africa also used local elephants in warfare. It would seem to me that the North African elephant, rather than the Asian or African species, would have been more suited to the trek across the Alps. Needless to say, the Atlas Mountains were part of the Atlantean sphere of control, and so may be the reason that Plato mentioned them. It is also reported that during the reign of the Ptolemies, in Egypt, they imported war elephants from Eritrea and East Africa. Dustin Kolb is a German researcher who also advocates a Mexican location for Atlantis, and endeavored, unconvincingly, to explain away Plato's mention of Atlantis as a reference to bulls and bison. The latter half of 2010 saw a new piece of nonsense hit the blogosphere when a claim that the Atlanteans had flying machines made of elephant skins suddenly appeared, and before you could say, cut and paste, it was adopted by a variety of websites. So Dumbo was not the first flying elephant. In fact, this daft idea was just a recycling of one of Edgar Cayce's revelations. End quote. Part 2. Florida's Ancient Elephants. Having thus addressed the challenge which Plato's explicit mentioning of elephants places on the search for Atlantis, we ought to address the fact that Florida is the mecca of Proboscidean fossil hunting. Mammoths, mastodons, and prehistoric elephants all abounded in the state of Florida, perfectly coinciding with the timelines provided by Plato for Atlantis.
In 1968, when I first came up here on the river, it was a clear spring, and in about an hour of scuba diving, I saw 11 skeletons of mammoths and mastodons. These sinkholes in the bottom of this river are like a time machine. The sediments slowly stack up, and each layer is a little chapter. And what's neat from our point of view as explorers is that those wet sinkholes slowly backfilled as the ice ages ended. And the record of those sediments included earliest peoples, extinct animals, and this backfilling episode. And that's what we go in the river to excavate. Here in the Wasissa River and in the Oscilla, we've got about a dozen major sites, and we're continuing to work and daily find exciting new features about the earliest people. Then there was a 15-year lapse before we got back up here. The impetus was a bison skull with a spear point right in the frontal bone and part of a bison kill site. So it's a paleontologist's and archaeologist's dream up here, once you learn how to get through the water to the bottom.
This site, Sloth Hole, is a focus of my master's and dissertation research. We have both a mastodon butchery from around 11,000 years ago and a campsite from around 10,000 years ago. All right, the last bit of mapping of the contours of the unit we'll have to do, we'll start around Unit 57 where the tusk came out, and as we work to the north, we'll cover the units where the worked ivory came from.
This 7.5-foot tusk that was recovered in intact sediments in another section of the Oscilla River here that ended up being 7.5 foot long, and it was preserved exquisitely in sediments that had stained it golden orange colored, and it was just a magnificent experience to be there as the excavators slowly uncovered the sediments millimeter by millimeter until this glorious tusk glowed orange in the otherwise dark water on the bottom.
The thrill of the discovery is every day always with us because we are constantly running into either butchered bones of an articulated mastodon or some of the other pieces such as an ivory foreshaft fragment that we found just a few days ago. Only one implement like this has been found west of the Mississippi, and here at Sloth Hole we've covered 60 fragments that seem to represent about 35 tools like this one. This example is 33.3 centimeters long, and when complete would have been about 40 centimeters long, making it far and away the largest ivory object that's been found in North America.
Some of the things that come out of the river are very special. The lithic points, like the Clovis points, the classic western ones, but then a lot of Florida varieties, Swanee points, Bolin points, stuff through time that culturally evolved. Also, we get very special preservation of bones, ivory, and wood that's sealed off in the river sediments. When we first find them, sometimes they turn brown on exposure to oxygen or sunlight, but they're beautiful.
All right, I got enough pigment now. I think it should match pretty good.
Okay, looks good.
Being able to cast these things and distribute them to other scientists and share the information without having the object travel, it's a very delicate object.
Okay, looks like a good color match on the ivory.
We just got to fill the barb right now. Okay, and if you can tap that and get the bubbles out of the end of it. Should run out a little bit, but not too bad. Well, here we have a cast of a barbed ivory piece from very nearby. The barbed ivory piece is very important because, as far as we know, it's unique, and it's clearly a point. It's not part of the foreshaft or point debate that rages among archaeologists. There you go. Tap it a little bit. And that should be full, so it should be okay now. These are finished casts of the very large Clovis point and the barbed ivory point, which now can be put on display in the exhibit hall or can be sent to other scientists worldwide for comparative purposes.
The satisfaction that I've received in my 30 years in this river, and indeed the whole project has received in the last 15 of very intense work, is impossible to describe. The museum and people of the future will benefit from this, but I think those of us that were directly involved are very, very privileged.
The Florida Museum of Natural History was chartered by the legislature in 1917, so that makes us over 80 years old at the present time. Since that time, it has grown to become the largest collection-based museum in the southeastern United States, and probably the most comprehensive university-based natural history museum in the country. So the citizens of Florida should be quite proud of this institution that has grown to such enormous capacity in 80 years.
Paleontologists in north central Florida are digging up something big. TV20's Emma Delamo shows us what crews found hidden underneath the earth.
This plot of grass and dirt was actually once a river, and crews tell me while they have found many different turtle fossils, something much larger has caught their attention. It's a job too big for one man to handle. So a team of paleontologists from the Florida Museum of Natural History, volunteers, and University of Florida students are digging up something big. They've discovered fossils at the Montbrook Fossil Site in Levy County.
We have been coming across skeletons of an extinct elephant called a gomphothere. And this gomphothere here is called Rhynchotherium, and it's different from modern elephants in that it has 4 tusks, 2 upper tusks and 2 lower tusks.
Block thinks these bones are 5 to 6 million years old.
5 to 6 million years old.
The crew has been working at this site for a year. They are locking the fossils up in plaster jackets before anxiously watching the fossil rise out of the hole and onto the loading truck. This is what it looks like underneath the plaster. After this, the skeletons go through a cleaning and stabilizing process before they're ready to be studied. A student with the University of Florida has always dreamed of being a paleontologist after visiting museums as a kid. Now she's grateful for this opportunity to get her hands dirty.
I was just so inspired every time that I went there. Just seeing all, their Hall of Fossils is absolutely so amazing. It's so inspiring. And I kind of always loved seeing the people behind the glass, and I always wanted to talk to them, and it's like now I'm out here doing that every single day.
An ancient discovery uncovered after only a year of work. Reporting in Levy County, Emma Delamo, TV 20 News.
Teachers are being credited with an incredible fossil discovery. They uncovered the jaw of a mastodon along with a pair of tusks dating back to the Florida Ice Age, more than 10,000 years ago. As Fox 13's Jordan Bowen reports, they found them while diving in local waters and think there could be more down there.
You can hear the screams of excitement through their scuba masks. They couldn't believe their eyes. They had just uncovered one of their best finds yet.
All of a sudden, we're just kind of swimming around, and I wave my hand like this, and the silt reveals just the two teeth completely whole sitting right there in front of us.
The jaw of a mastodon, and not far away, two tusks. Fossils at least 10,000 years old.
I heard screaming, I heard hooting and hollering. I look over to the side, and there's Rick with these two massive teeth.
Henry Sadler and Rick Cochran are both teachers at Admiral Farragut Academy and frequent dive partners on the weekends.
These tusks, unfortunately, are really fragile. You can see where they're peeling apart away right
They made the discovery while diving in local waters on private property. The mastodon animal is similar to that of a woolly mammoth. As Cochran explains, finding tusks like these in such great condition is nearly unheard of.
Sometimes you can have things that literally will turn to dust right before your eyes, and things that can be very hard. This was somewhere in the middle, so we got really lucky with it. Even the tusks, ivory doesn't fossilize well. The ivory tusks you see from woolly mammoths and stuff, they tend to come from Siberia or the permafrost, not so much our Florida rivers. And so when we find them, they're very fragile, very hard to get out.
It's why they used zip ties to help keep them intact. The tusks are now being stabilized, which means they're using chemicals to make sure they'll be preserved for years to come. As for the teeth, they'll need to wait a few more weeks for them to fully dry out before they can begin the stabilization process.
We really pride ourselves on giving the kids opportunities that they wouldn't find anywhere else.
Once the fossils are stabilized, Sadler and Cochran plan to display them in the classroom, giving students an up-close look at history, dating back more than 10,000 years.
We use that as a hook to kind of bring them into science and talk about other things around fossils.
Sadler and Cochran are planning their next dive in the same area very soon, confident there are more fossils waiting to be found. Reporting in St. Pete, Jordan Bowen, Fox 13
Think
News.
of Florida, you think of sandy beaches and palm trees. But back during the Ice Age, it was a cold and frigid place. And some divers just found incredible proof of that.
It's the find of a lifetime.
Hey, we need some help.
And his discovery is so massive, when he surfaces, he urgently needs help.
Right behind me, over here, I have the mammoth leg bone, which is that massive bone right there.
Oh my God, can you bring that towards the camera?
Give me a second, it's rather heavy.
Wow.
You can see it's still quite large.
So, what is it? It's the humerus bone of a massive Columbian mammoth. He's from the Ice Age. The humerus would be right here. This is a skeleton of a mammoth at the La Brea Tar Pits Museum in Los Angeles. Henry Sadler is a middle school science teacher. He found the fossil while diving in the Peace River in Florida with fellow amateur paleontologist Derek Demeter.
How significant a find is this?
To find something in this condition, in this size, is pretty awesome.
They also found a tooth from a saber-toothed tiger, which became extinct about 12,000 years ago. Henry plans on keeping it in his classroom as a teaching tool.
Interesting story here. A Tampa man made an incredible discovery while diving off the coast of Venice.
As 10 Tampa Bay's Hannah Deneen explains, it's a rare piece of history that could be worth thousands of dollars.
Once in a lifetime. What I've been told.
A prehistoric relic now decorating 29-year-old Alex Lundberg's Tampa apartment.
So yeah, it's in a box for Christmas lights and it lives next to my bed.
Last month, the amateur fossil hunter was diving off Minnesota Beach near Venice.
Just see this piece right here sticking out, just a small strip of it. And I was like, okay, like that might be a tusk. Like we find lots of pieces out there, just broken stuff all the time.
A tusk of the extinct mastodon, a cousin of the more well-known mammoth. But this was no fragment, rather a lengthy 4-foot remnant.
Swim it to the boat, and then we made a sling out of a beach towel and just hoisted it over the side. And I mean, it was absolutely surreal just getting it up because I was, expecting it to crumble or fall apart.
All paleontologists are looking for that kind of diamond in the rough, right?
Educators with Bradenton's Bishop Museum of Science and Nature say such a tusk could be anywhere from tens of thousands to millions of years old.
The great thing about Florida, especially if you're looking for animals that were around during the last ice age, is that the coastline extended way further out than today. So these animals were walking on dry land up to 50, 60 miles out into the Gulf of Mexico relative to us today.
While very few can be found for sale, available ones are being sold for thousands. But for Alex Lundberg, this treasure is priceless.
Yeah, I don't ever plan on selling it. You know, I told my girlfriend, like, this tusk is going to go to our kids and our grandkids. Like, this is a family tusk now. It's part of the family.
Hannah Deneen, 10 Tampa Bay.
Now, before he can pass it down for generations, Alex says he will report his find to the Florida Museum of Natural History in line with his fossil permit. Then, fingers crossed, they will let him keep it.
This 4-foot, 60-pound mastodon tusk recently found about a half-mile off the coast of Venice. Alex Lundberg was scuba diving with Blair Morrow when he made the discovery about 25 feet underwater.
I swim over to it and start fanning it, and all of a sudden, you know, there's this huge section of it exposed, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, oh my god, like, this is a tusk.
After finding the fossil, which could be 1 million years old, he did get help from Morrow to bring it up to the surface.
I just show her this 4-foot tusk, and I mean, her eyes just like light up. And so she comes up with me to the surface. We swim it to the boat, and we made a sling out of a beach towel and just kind of hoisted it over the side of the boat. And it was just absolutely surreal that it came up in one piece. It didn't break apart at all.
Lundberg says that area around Venice Beach is known for shark's teeth, but there is a whole other world down there.
There are other fossil beds that are all Ice Age animal material. So it's mostly terrestrial animals like Smilodon, saber-toothed tiger, giant ground sloth, mammoth, mastodon. And so after, finding so many shark's teeth after a while, you're just kind of like, I want the mammal stuff. I want that Ice Age fossil.
Lundberg says he's been diving off the coast of Venice for about 5 years now and will be out there again this weekend with the hopes of finding another treasure.
Not only is Florida the mecca of Proboscidean fossil hunting, it is also one of the few places in America where the coexistence of humans with living, breathing Proboscideans has been confirmed beyond a reasonable doubt. Such findings lend much credence to diffusionist theories, such as the Atlantis myth, and serve to weaken the academically maintained Bering Strait narrative.
Have to fly to outer space or even another state to find a rare gem, catching the attention of many these days.
As Terry Parker shows you, a Treasure Coast man may have found the oldest piece of American artwork. Hiding under the sink of his mobile home. Terry.
Well, it's one thing to find a mammoth bone 13,000 years old, but the history world sat up and took notice when this fossil appeared complete with a remarkably sophisticated, detailed carving of the actual mammoth made by some Ice Age artist. Now the amateur fossil hunter aims to cash in on his spectacular find, even though some critics say he should give it away for free.
James Kennedy has been digging for fossils in Vero Beach since he was 16.
This big guy here, that's a piece of mammoth bone.
It's more than a hobby for Kennedy. He suffers from epilepsy and can't work to support his family, so fossils are a welcome diversion.
It captivates me. There, that's one way.
Now, though, Kennedy has discovered a fossil so astounding that some experts are saying it will change history.
One of, if not the most important archaeological find in the Western Hemisphere.
Kennedy found this shard of mammoth bone. What's so incredible is there is a faint carving of a mammoth on the bone, close up and in detail. The scientists say for the first time proves Ice Age man coexisted with the prehistoric animals.
They said this is the most rarest and most important artwork in the Americas.
The carving is hard to see. Here's some tracings Kennedy made that show it in remarkable, sophisticated detail. Kennedy found the shard a few years ago and tossed it under the sink. It was only when he was washing his bones last year to sell at a flea market that he saw the carving, called scientists at the University of Florida, and after extensive testing was told by those scientists what he had.
After doing everything they could to discredit it, that they determined it's got to be real.
Now the fossil is at Ron Rennick's auction house, and the pair plans to auction it off in the coming months. But the idea that something so significant could disappear into a private collection has some saying Kennedy should donate it to a museum. Kennedy says he's already let the experts see the piece, write about it, and even show it.
But truly what it boils down to is I found something worth millions of dollars in the dirt, and by no means am I I'm not giving it to anyone. No way.
Kennedy says he's in talks with the Smithsonian to show the fossil either before or after the auction. They do plan an absolute auction, which means highest bid takes it, and they're not planning on a minimum. They expect to get bids from around the world. No date is yet set. Terry Parker, WPBF 25.
Part 3. American Cryptozoology. Venturing down this rabbit hole even further, there is great evidence to show that man lived alongside the American Proboscideans far longer than previously supposed, lining up perfectly with timelines given for Atlantis and the construction of Noah's Ark. There is also considerable evidence to show that American Proboscideans lived much farther into the Holocene, or current geological epoch, than is generally admitted by our mainstream academia, and may have even roamed this continent as recently as the Industrial Revolution. As you will see, the reality of such a so-called cryptid is not as silly as it may seem. With that being said, I would like to introduce you to the American elephant. The following comes to us from the Encyclopedia of Cryptozoology. Quote, "The American elephant is a cryptid reported historically from the United States and Canada, mainly from New England, the Great Lakes region, and the Rocky Mountains. Animals resembling elephants were mentioned in the stories of a variety of Amerindian groups, particularly in the East, although the animals were usually said to have vanished at some point in the past. Living elephants were occasionally reported from, or rumored to exist in, the American interior from the 16th to early 19th centuries. Although more questionable reports of woolly mammoths in Alaska and northwest Canada continued into the 20th century. Of the 4 or 5 proboscideans known to have existed in North America during the late Pleistocene, historical reports of elephants were associated with the most famous, the American mastodon and the mammoths. These cryptids are also known as stiff-legged bears, one translation of certain Amerindian names for them. They have also occasionally been associated with the Great Naked Bear. Traveling through North America in the 18th century, the French Jesuit Pierre-François Xavier de Charlevoix heard stories from the Algonquin people of an enormous moose with a 5th arm coming out of its shoulder. Charlevoix regarded this as unbelievable, but some later commenters have suggested the moose may have been an elephant, its 5th leg explained as a trunk. Quote, "There is also a rather amusing tradition among these barbarians of a great moose, next to which the others are like ants. They say it has legs so high that 8 feet of snow do not hinder it. Its skin is proof against all sorts of weapons, and it has a sort of arm coming from its shoulder that it uses as we do ours. It never fails to have a large number of moose following it that make up its court and that render it all of the services it requires of them." Benjamin Stickney, an Indian agent who worked northwest of the Ohio, told geologist William H. Mather before 1843 of an Indian tradition which he believed referred to the mastodon. Quote, "There was a tradition among the Indians of the existence of the mastodon. They were often seen. They fed on the boughs of species of lime tree, and they did not lie down, but leaned against a tree to sleep." End quote. In 1934, the anthropologist William Duncan Strong provoked discussions of American elephant traditions from Quebec and Labrador. With an article in the American Anthropologist, Strong was interested in the subject because several Naskapi informants had described a vanished animal, the Cachito husqua, to him as a sort of elephant. Quote, "When asked to describe the Cachito husqua, The Naskapi informants said he was very large, had a big head, large ears and teeth. The Naskapi informants said he was very large, had a big head, long ears and teeth, and a long nose with which he hit people. His tracks in the snow were described in their stories as large and round. One Indian, who had seen pictures of the modern elephant, said he thought the Cachito Husqua was the elephant. The older Indians' question were unanimous in declaring that such had always been the description of the Cachito Husqua, so far as they had any knowledge." End quote. Strong also quoted a legend communicated to him by a fellow anthropologist, Frank G. Speck, collected from the Penobscot Indians of Maine. The myth featured a Penobscot culture hero named Snowy Owl, who was said to have killed large, long-toothed animals. Quote, "He saw what seemed to be hills without vegetation, moving slowly about. Upon closer scrutiny, he saw that these masses were really the backs of great animals with long teeth. Animals so huge that when they lay down, they could not get up. They drank for half a day at a time. Snowy Owl went on and after many adventures secured his wife. Then he returned to the place where the animals had their, quote, yards. He cut certain trees upon which the monsters were accustomed to lean at night, so that when they did so, the trees would break. Thus the animals fell upon the sharp stumps, and Snowy Owl shot them all." End quote. Archaeologist David Boyle referred to, quote, somewhat vague traditions among the Ojibwa and Iroquois of a large animal that once ranged the forest, so strong that it was able to crush the trees that stood in its path. According to Scott, stories of elephant-like animals were told by the Iroquois, Wyandots, Tuscaroros, and others. Indians of Massachusetts had a legend about walking haystacks, which were once seen moving down the coast of Martha's Vineyard. The Micmacs of Nova Scotia are also widely reported to have a mastodon tradition. The Chitimacha of Louisiana had a tradition of long-nosed animal, sometimes identified as a mastodon, and which the Chitimacha themselves identified with elephants, introduced by Europeans. The animal was said to have come out of the sea, but it subsequently took up residence in a forest near what is now Charenton. This supposedly occurred at around the time Europeans arrived in the New World, when the Chitimacha acquired firearms. They immediately sought out the monster, but it had disappeared. Quote, "A long time ago, a being with a long nose came out of the ocean and began to kill people. It would root up trees with its nose to get a person who sought refuge in the branches, and people lived on scaffolds to get away from it. It made its home in a piece of woods near Charenton, and when guns were introduced, the people went into this wood to kill the monster, but could not find it. When the elephant was seen, it was thought to be the same creature, and was consequently named Neka si Tkakami, or long-nosed spirit." End quote. According to anthropologist James H. Howard, stories of hairy elephants were commonly told by Amerindians of the Midwest, and he had personally collected such stories from Omaha, Ponca, Dakota, and Winnebago informants. Unkagila is sometimes cited as a Lakota name for the mastodon. The writer François-René de Chateaubriand heard during his 1791 trip through America that mammoths had been seen by hunters somewhere west of the Mississippi River. Oral traditions of the Ponca people of Nebraska make mention of elephants, alleged by tribal historian Peter Leclerc to be hairy, encountered alive and dead when the Ponca first arrived in the Niobrara River in northern Nebraska, in the Great Plains region. Although the exact timing of the Ponca's migration to the region and their first appearance as a distinct group is now debated, This is believed to have occurred between the 15th and 18th centuries, possibly post-dating European arrival in the New World. Leclerc's narrative of Ponca history was received from the elderly chief, John Bull, who insisted that, quote, the Ponca is very strict with the history. Anyone making a mistake is corrected by groups of old men. According to Leclerc, the Ponca would go out on annual bison hunts east, before cycling back to the Niobrara River. During one of these early hunts, while traveling from Santee to the Niobrara, a hunting party came across a dead pas nuta, identified as an elephant or a hairy elephant, as well as a living water panther. The Ponca also allegedly saw a, quote, live elephant in the region of what is now Valentine, near a place called Twin Butts. According to different accounts, the elephant was seen either by a small waterfall, or a large spring, or by a cave. In both accounts, the fact that the elephant was alive is stressed. The name pas nuta is also applied to the Ponca, to a cannibal giant. During John Hawkins's 1567 expedition to Spanish Mexico, a party of around 100 sailors were marooned near Tampico, in what is now Mexico. A year later, 3 of the men, including one David Ingram, were rescued on the coast of Nova Scotia, in what is now Canada. Ingram's account of their trek north was written down 13 years later by third parties. How much of his story is true is hotly debated, but he claimed to have seen 2 animals which some have interpreted as mammoths or mastodons. Ingram claimed to have seen both elefantes and unces, the latter term meaning large cats, in America. He further alleged that some Amerindians fashioned trumpets out of elefantes' teeth. Ingram also described a gigantic tusked animal, distinct from the elephants, which some have identified as mastodon. Quote, this expedition did also see in those countries a monstrous beast twice as big as a horse, and in every proportion like unto a horse, both in mane, hoof, hair, and neighing, saving it was small towards the hinder parts, like a greyhound. These beasts have 2 teeth or horns of a foot long, growing straight forth out of their nostrils. They are natural enemies to the horse. End quote. The city of Caruncro in Louisiana, which takes its name from the carrion crow, or buzzard, is said to have been named by the Atacapa Indians after a mastodon died in a nearby bayou or creek, attracting thousands of buzzards. It is not clear when this is supposed to have occurred, but the first possible reference appeared in the American Weekly Mercury on the 4th of December, 1740. Quote, "'Tis also advised from Louisiana that the natives, advancing into some uninhabited countries, found some elephants that had perished in a marshy place, which had given rise to a question whether this country does not border upon Asia, the rather because the natives say they never saw nor heard that there were any animal of that kind in that country." End quote. According to a letter written by Martin Duralde, a commandant of Opelousas who recorded much information on the Amerindian peoples of Louisiana, the mastodon story had been passed down over the generations and had occurred distantly enough for the Atacapa informants to have forgotten where exactly the mastodon died. The remains of a mastodon had supposedly been discovered in the bayou, where they had been seen by Duralde after the mastodon story had spread. Quote, "Many years before the discovery of the elephant in the bayou called Carencro, an Atacapa savage had informed a man who is at present in my service, in the capacity of a cowherd, that the ancestors of his nation transmitted to their descendants that a beast of enormous size had perished either in this bayou or in one of the 2 watercourses a short distance from it, without being able to indicate the true place." the antiquity of the event having without doubt made them forget it. The fact has realized this tradition." End quote. Duralde later wrote a more detailed letter describing the discovery of the remains, which was published in the Transactions of the American Philosophical Society in 1809, but he only briefly alluded to the Atacapa legend. According to Duralde, the bones had been discovered shortly after 1760. The quote-unquote father of paleontology, Georges Cuvier, also discovered more mastodon remains near Caruncro during his tour of the United States in 1804. Cuvier referred to the discovery and the mastodon tradition as, quote, curious and interesting. The Pinchaque, or Panchique, was a cryptid reported from the Colombian Andes, described as an elephantine animal, usually explained by either the mountain tapir, which takes its specific name from the cryptid, or by a late surviving Andean gomphotheer. There is also limited iconographic evidence, which may or may not support the late existence of a proboscidean, such as the Andean or lowland gomphotheer. Zoologist Francois Désiré Roulin collected accounts of the Pinchaque in the Andean regions of the Cauca and Popayan during the 1820s. While its appearance was always described in the same way, and it was always said to live in the eastern mountains, reports of its size were inconsistent. Some claimed it to be the size of a horse, and others described it as enormous. Several people in Popayan were firmly convinced that a very large quadruped existed in the mountains. Hunters had discovered very large dung balls, as well as tracks measuring 9 inches or 10 inches in width, and a tuft of long brownish hair caught on a branch some 8 or 10 feet in the air. In 1849, an anonymous traveler in the Pasto province, now the Nariño department, a region of Colombia bordering Cauca in the north and Ecuador in the south, wrote to the Spanish magazine Semanario Pintoresco Español, claiming to have received a description of a very large mammal from locals of that province. Quote, "It appeared around the lake and its surroundings from time to time, and left tracks showing it to be an animal bigger than an elephant. According to the description of these people, it is covered with a coat of fur similar to that of the camel, and its strength must be quite remarkable. A man from the village assured me that following the tracks of this animal one day, he came across a bear which had been torn to pieces, but nevertheless they maintain that it is herbivorous." End quote. A black ware pottery figure of what appears to be an elephant was allegedly unearthed at the Bolivian archaeological site of Tiahuanaco, which preserves artifacts dating back to between 380 and 1000 AD. One article on the figure identifies it as a pyrothere, a vaguely elephant animal which lived in South America. But as noted by Carl Schuker, these animals disappear from the fossil record during the Oligocene, more than 20 million years ago, and would likely not have resembled elephants as closely as the statue. If it is intended to depict a genuine proboscidean, an alternate explanation is that it is a recently created fake. In his Journal of Residence and Travels in Colombia during the years 1823 and 1824-25, Captain Charles Stewart Cochrane, who had resided and traveled in Colombia for some time, recorded in his entry for the 12th of January, 1824, sightings of, quote, carnivorous elephants, or mastodons, which were then suspected of having been carnivorous, in the Colombian Andes, near Cartago, just below the snowline. Harold T. Wilkins and Jerosley Marais describe Cochrane as observing the elephants for himself. Cochrane was also the first to document the toxic secretion of poison dart frogs and their use by Colombian natives. Quote, "From a small chain of hills near to this range of mountains, the Cordillera Occidental, with a good glass, have been seen numbers of carnivorous elephants feeding on the plains which skirt these frozen regions. Their enormous teeth have occasionally been seen, but no one has yet succeeded in killing one of these animals, or, indeed, in getting near to them." End quote. According to Merez, Captain Cochrane's account was originally mocked, although some took his story very seriously. John Ranking, who believed the existence of wild elephants in Colombia was certain, cited the report as positive evidence that the mastodon still lived. There is possible evidence that the late Pleistocene Andean Gomphothere, Cuvieronius hyodon, may have survived at least until 200 to 400 AD in the Andean regions. In Ecuador, near Quito, a complete skeleton of this Gomphothere was discovered alongside a number of spearheads and pottery shards from this date. The South American Cuvieronius was endemic to the Andes, where it inhabited temperate to cold habitats in Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, and Chile, and had a mixed diet. End quote.
There is some video that has gone viral on the internet. It claims to show an animal that went extinct 4,000 years ago, still alive and in the wild.
Yeah, some people say it's a hoax, but others claim it could be evidence that woolly mammoths are still alive. All right, check out the video. It was obtained by the Sun newspapers in England, and it was reportedly shot by a Russian government engineer in a desolate, relatively unexplored area of Siberia last year. Although critics say the quality of the video, and it only runs for 25 seconds, prove that it's faked. If true, though, it could provide proof that mammoths did not die 4,000 years ago as previously thought, and experts are reviewing the video. We'll let you know what the final verdict is, although we did just get word that a video expert in Hollywood is thinking that that video that you see there of the supposed mammoth is like a bear.
With a fish in his mouth.
Yeah.
Which makes more sense.
It does, but anything's possible, right?
Well, apparently.
I saw Bigfoot there, too, didn't you?
Part 4. The Republican Mascot. Most Americans are aware that the elephant is the emblem and mascot for the Republican Party, but not many know why. Even fewer are aware of the esoteric reasons behind why that animal was chosen. The Republican Party, as it is known today, was actually founded by Thomas Jefferson, who had a fascination with American Proboscideans. Let us resume from the Encyclopedia of Cryptozoology. Quote, "The future American president, Thomas Jefferson, had an interest in a number of animals which would now be called cryptids, including the American lion, megalonyx, and mastodons. In his work Notes on the State of Virginia in 1785, Jefferson recorded an account of a now famous Indian legend of a big buffalo, previously recorded in 1748 by a French officer named Fabry, which he believed could refer to the mastodon. Quote, "In ancient times, a herd of these tremendous animals came to the Big Bone Licks and began a universal destruction of the bear, deer, elks, buffaloes, and other animals which had been created for the use of the Indians. The great man above, looking down and seeing this, was so enraged that he seized his lightning, descended on the earth, seated himself on a neighboring mountain, on a rock, of which his seat and the print of his feet are still to be seen, and hurled his bolts among them till the whole were slaughtered, except the big bull, who, presenting his forehead to the shafts, shook them off as they fell, but missing one at length, it wounded him in the side, whereon, springing round, he bounded over the Ohio, over the Wabash, the Illinois, and finally over the Great Lakes, where he is living at this day." End quote. This legend is told by a variety of Amerindian groups in the New England region, who call the animal, quote, the Great Buffalo, or Big Queequees, father of oxen, and Great Elk. Another version of the legend was later published by the showman Albert Koch. Jefferson cautiously believed that the mastodon could survive somewhere in the unexplored interior of America. According to the lawyer and educator Nathan Guilford, the Potawatomi and Shawnee west of the Great Lakes, called the extinct mastodons tree-eaters, and described them as semi-aquatic, browsing animals, with very long and curling tusks, a rough blue-gray hide, and large ears. These Indians did not hunt the tree-eaters. Rather, they respected the elephants for clearing the forests, enabling them to plant maize, and for their, quote, affectionate and docile disposition. Guilford quoted legends of Indians riding tree-eaters, and of a baby tree-eater, too young to browse successfully, wandering down the Ohio Valley and being domesticated by a Shawnee chief. As well as legends, Thomas Jefferson recorded a rumor that elephants were still to be found somewhere west of the Missouri River, on the authority of a certain Stanley, who had been captured by Indians near the Tennessee River. Quote, a Mr. Stanley, taken prisoner by the Indians near the mouth of the Tennessee, relates that, after being transferred through several tribes, from one to another, he was at length carried over the mountains west of the Missouri to a river which runs westwardly, that these bones abounded there, and that the natives described to him the animal to which they belonged, as still existing in the northern parts of the country, from which description he judged it to be an elephant. End quote. Republican President Abraham Lincoln also had a fascination with ancient American Proboscideans. The following is an authentic quote of his, dated to the fall of 1848. Quote, when Columbus first sought this continent, when Christ suffered on the cross, when Moses led Israel through the Red Sea, nay, even when Adam first came from the hand of his Maker, then as now, Niagara was roaring here. The eyes of that species of extinct giants, whose bones fill the mounds of America, have gazed on Niagara as ours do now. Contemporary with the whole race of men, and older than the first man, Niagara is strong and fresh today as 10,000 years ago. The mammoth and mastodon now so long dead, that fragments of their monstrous bones alone testify that they ever lived, have gazed on Niagara. In that long, long time, never still for a single moment, never dried, never froze, never slept, never rested. End quote. For those wondering, Lincoln was not only addressing the ancient American Proboscideans, but was in fact also referring to a race of giant men interred within the Indian mounds of America. If you'd like to learn more about the hidden history of giants in Florida and ancient America, check out my other videos. In 1862, as the Civil War was in full swing, Abraham Lincoln came very close to receiving a number of elephants from the King of Siam for use in battle, as was and is the custom of Thailand. The following comes to us from the American Battlefield Trust and includes a letter of response written by Lincoln himself. Quote, in one of the more humorous events of the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln politely rejected an offer of elephants from the King of Siam. While the letter from Rama IV, aka Mongut, was addressed to former President James Buchanan, it was up to Lincoln and his Secretary of State, William Seward, to politely decline this offer from afar. As Lincoln points out in his reply, steam power had overtaken the need for heavy animal power of this kind. This friendly exchange has elicited many fanciful what-ifs. What if the Union or Confederate Army had use of battalions of war elephants during the Civil War? Could there have been herds of angry pachyderms at Pickett's Charge, or emerging from the forest lines at Shiloh? End quote. Let us now read from the letter. Quote, to His Majesty Somdetch Phra Paramandra, Maha Mongut, King of Siam, great and good friend, I have received your Majesty's 2 letters of the date of February 14th, 1861. I have also received in good condition the royal gifts which accompanied those letters, namely, a sword of costly materials and exquisite workmanship, a photographic likeness of your majesty and of your majesty's beloved daughter, and also 2 elephants' tusks of length and magnitude such as indicate that they could have belonged only to an animal which was a native of Siam. Your majesty's letters show an understanding that our laws forbid the president from receiving these rich presents as personal treasures. They are therefore accepted in accordance with your majesty's desire as tokens of your goodwill and friendship for the American people. Congress being now in session at this capital, I have had great pleasure in making known to them this manifestation of your majesty's munificence and kind consideration. Under the directions, the gifts will be placed among the archives of the government, where they will remain perpetually as tokens of mutual esteem and pacific dispositions, more honorable to both nations than any trophies of conquest could be. I appreciate most highly your majesty's tender of good offices in forwarding this government a stock from which a supply of elephants might be raised on our own soil. This government would not hesitate to avail itself of so generous an offer if the object were one which could be made practically useful in the present condition of the United States. Our political jurisdiction, however, does not reach a latitude so low as to favor the multiplication of the elephant, and steam on land, as well as on water, has been our best and most efficient agent of transportation in internal commerce. I shall have occasion at no distant day to transmit to your majesty some token of indication of the high sense which this government entertains of your majesty's friendship. Meantime, wishing for your majesty a long and happy life, and for the generous and emulous people of Siam the highest possible prosperity, I commend both to the blessing of Almighty God. Your good friend, Abraham Lincoln. Signed from Washington, February the 3rd, 1862. End quote. Speaking of the Civil War, seeing the elephant is the term soldiers used at that time to describe their first experience with combat, or to express their disillusion to warfare and desire for peace. This expression may have had its origin with the armies of Alexander the Great, whose morale plummeted in the presence of their enemies, war elephants. The phrase has since become an Americanism, which refers to gaining experience of the world in general, at a significant cost. The elephant became the emblem and mascot for the Republican Party of America around 1874, when cartoonist Thomas Nast began using them in Harper's Weekly to symbolize Republicans during midterm elections. The mutual characteristics being alluded to are docility in times of peace, skittishness, emphasis on military might, overconsumption, and expansionism. The Republicans quickly embraced the elephant, making it their official symbol, and still use it today. Then there is the potential esoteric reference to Plato's Republic, which is written to be read as though that dialogue transpired the day before the dialogues pertaining to Atlantis in Plato's Critias and Timaeus, in which he specifically mentions the elephants of Atlantis. Astrotheologically speaking, the elephant, the largest land animal, is ruled by Jupiter, the largest planet. The planet Jupiter exalts in the zodiacal sign of Cancer, which means he is happiest and strongest there. One can choose to not believe in astrology, but one cannot deny the reality that the word conservative bears the word Cancer within it. Every astrologer worth their salt knows that Cancer is the most conservative, concerned, conscious, consistent, considerate, consoling, consumptive, cancerous, kinky, and somewhat cankerous sign of the zodiac, who frequently cancels their plans so they can return to their shell. They display considerable talent as cantors, counselors, and consulates. If we allow the letter C to go soft like an S, as with the second C in the word cancer, we find a multitude of Cancerian traits, including sensitive, sensual, censorious, sunken, songful, and synchronistic. They are not so much teachers as they are senseis. The exact same phonetic links exist for the Democratic Party of America, who use the donkey, ass, or mule for their emblem and mascot. The donkey is ruled by Saturn, the eternal adversary of Jupiter, the elephant. The planet Saturn exalts in the zodiacal sign of Libra, from which we get the word and description of liberal, or libertine. Another one of the most famous elephant icons in America would have to be the mascot of Alabama University, located in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Despite the phonetic link between Tusk and Tuscaloosa, we are told the names have nothing to do with each other. The city of Tuscaloosa, however, was named for the chief Tazcaloosa, a dark-skinned giant who wore a so-called Moorish turban and battled with the De Soto expedition of 1539 after they landed near Tampa Bay.
What happened to the University of Alabama's live elephant mascot? LSU has a live tiger, Auburn has a live eagle, I'm sure Tennessee has at least a few live volunteers, but for as big as the University of Alabama is, the school doesn't have a live elephant. So as the question pointed out, Alabama did at one point have a live elephant. Crimson Tide players had earned the nickname the Red Elephant sometime in the late 1920s, early 1930s. There are competing stories as to which. So in the 1940s, the school secured a live elephant that was housed on campus named Alamite. Alamite would take part in parades, and for the homecoming game, the Queen would ride into the stadium on the elephant's head. But while it was an exciting spectacle for fans, it was also crazy expensive to house a live elephant on campus. So sometime in the mid-1950s, the school decided to give up on housing an elephant and just rent elephants for big events. While this was a cheaper solution, it wasn't necessarily an easy one. First, you still had the cost of rentals, and having an elephant trample through the campus was its own headache. And I don't know if you've ever tried to rent an elephant, but it can be tricky, doubly so in the pre-Google days. It's not like you can just call the elephant store and put in a reservation. Somebody had to track down nearby traveling circuses and negotiate a cost to borrow and transport the elephants for a day. But it was the only solution they had, so for decades, rental elephants were a regular part of big Alabama festivities. However, in the 1960s, a group of students decided to give a go at a costumed elephant mascot. But the early prototype had its problems. The costume included a giant, heavy fiberglass head that was difficult to see out of. A student named Mel Espy took on the mantle of the first elephant mascot, but it was short-lived. The mask was a little bizarre, and most accounts say Bear Bryant hated it and ordered Mel to stay away from him during football games. So Mel had to navigate the field, barely able to see, while trying to avoid Coach Bryant and not knock into everyone. To make matters worse, most other mascots were still live animals. So during photo ops, Mel had gotten peed on by Tennessee's hound dog, kept terrifying away Mississippi's bulldog, and even had part of his costume torn off by Houston's live cougar. And for all his trouble, after just a few years, Mel Espy was forced to hang up the elephant costume when it became clear this just wasn't going to work out. The school continued to use rental elephants off and on, but in the late 1970s, another student wanted to give the idea of a costume mascot another try. It was going to be difficult because the last costume was a flop, and again, Bear Bryant hated it, but he found the one man who could help him bring the mascot back. Now University of Alabama administrator Mel Espy. The student and Espy teamed up to convince Coach Bryant to let them try again, and he eventually relented. The result, Big Al, the current mascot, made his debut in the 1979 Sugar Bowl. Now, live elephants were still used for a few more years, but the tradition largely disappeared after a guy got injured when he climbed into an elephant's enclosure in 1982. Today, every blue moon, someone might shell out the cost for a live elephant for a big Bama event. And it's also been proposed in recent years that now that Alabama football is the machine that prints money, maybe they could get back into the live elephant game. But so far, no one has been able to justify the cost or the headache. So I wouldn't count on a return of Alamite anytime soon. But hopefully some Alabama fans will appreciate Big Al a little bit more now that they've learned that a man had to be attacked by a live cougar to help bring him to life. I'm Jonathan Soboleski for Reckon.
It's tough to imagine a Bama game day without the presence of Big Al. The Mammoth Mammal is one of the most beloved mascots in all of sports. And while he's been a mainstay on the Alabama sidelines for decades, his presence wasn't always welcome. In 1930, sports writer Everett Strooper referred to Coach Wallace Wade's linemen as the Red Elephants due to their colossal stature and the crimson jerseys they donned. The 30 squad would post an overall 10-0 record, shutting out 8 opponents and defeating Washington State 24-0 in the Rose Bowl to be crowned national champions. And while the elephant was quickly adopted by fans, the Tide would not officially recognize the elephant as its mascot for nearly 5 more decades.
Legendary coach Bear Bryant had a lot to do with that, as the head coach and athletics director didn't think the elephant was well representative of football players. He felt that the elephants were slow and clumsy, and this was not the image of his players that he wanted to portray. But after continued outcry from the student body, Bryant finally gave in, saying if that's what the students want, then that's what it should be. So on January 1st, 1979, Big Al made his big debut. Alabama took on undefeated Penn State in the Sugar Bowl, and a fourth quarter goal line stand would surge the tide to another national championship.
4th and goal with a half a yard. Newman, he didn't make it. Sensational play and maybe prevented Penn State from winning the national championship.
Big Al has been a large part of Bama game days ever since. Whether tussling with the Tigers or surfing over the students, Big Al brings it on game day. So grab some peanuts and raise a trunk to the best mascot in the game.
Part 5. The Elephant Capital of America. Approximately 1/5 of all the elephants living in both North and South America can be found in the state of Florida. The National Elephant Center was also founded outside of Vero Beach by a group of 10 directors from zoos accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. The fact that Florida remains the elephant capital of the Americas ought to act as a convincing, mystical evidence for its Atlantean legacy. Most people in America have only seen elephants in the circus or at the zoo. America's most famous circus, the Ringling Brothers, and Barnum and Bailey's greatest show on earth, was actually headquartered in Sarasota, Florida, and it is there that the troupe spent their winters. It is from the Ringling Circus that Florida is said to have received the bulk of its living elephants. It has been theorized by some that the Ringling Circus served to dispose of and repurpose any and all animals in North America which did not fit into the Smithsonian-approved curriculum, be they remnants of the Pleistocene or remnants of a pre-Columbian transatlantic empire. My opinion that the Moors of Spain either escaped to Florida shortly around the time of their expulsion from the Iberian Peninsula in 1492, or possibly retreated to existing Moorish strongholds in Florida and the Americas. This is why Moorish architecture can be found throughout Florida. This brings us to my second possible reason for the presence of elephants in early Florida. If we have both Moorish architecture and Moorish-descended peoples present in Florida, it is not ridiculous to think we should find Moorish animals, such as the elephant. The Moors descend from the Berbers, who descend from the Carthaginians, who were just one colony of the Phoenicians. These Phoenicians transported elephants across the sea many times over the course of 2,000 years. These elephants being transported to areas they were not native to were used both in war and for labor. So, if they did it then, it's very possible that they could have gotten some to the Americas. These would not have been able to run feral like other animals, and thus not establish a wild population. Considering how sought after ivory was, ivory harvesting was likely a driving factor in the cover-up of American elephants. It is a well-known fact that all of the original Ringling Brothers were high-ranking Freemasons, thus bolstering the idea that they could truly have been involved in some type of global conspiracy. The following comes to us from Wendy Ray Wazut Barrett, Ph.D. Quote, "Each of the 7 Ringling Brothers was a Scottish Rite Mason. They were members of the Scottish Rite Consistory in Milwaukee, a theater that boasted a Sossman and Landis scenery collection, supervised by Thomas G. Moses during its production in 1913. In fact, August Ringling and his 7 sons all joined the fraternity between January 1890 and August 1891. Each was raised in Baraboo Lodge number 34 in Baraboo, Wisconsin, during that time. This is not unusual when considering the percentage of men involved with some type of fraternity during the late 19th century. and how the Freemasonry could become a family affair for fathers and sons. Alf T. could be called the ringleader of the group, as he was the first to become a Mason. Here is when each man became a Master Mason. Alf T., January 22nd, 1890. John on March 1st of 1890. Al on March 29th of 1890. Charles on April 9th of 1890. Otto on April 9th of 1890. Gus on February 4th of 1891. Henry on March 18th of 1891. And August Ringling on August 9th, 1891. However, it was their combined roles as Masonic officers during 1891 that caught my eye. Their Masonic roles were noted in the minutes of a meeting on April 8th, 1891. Alf T. Ringling was Worshipful Master. August Gus Ringling was Senior Warden. Al Ringling was Junior Warden. Charles Ringling was Senior Deacon. Otto Ringling was Junior Deacon. And Henry Ringling was Senior Steward. In 1900, the Buffalo Courier included the story of the Ringling family in a section called, quote, Travelers Toward the East, printed the 9th of December, page 25. The article reported, quote, A Masonic journal says that the Ringling brothers are known all over the country as the proprietors of the Ringling Circus. 7 of these brothers are members of a Baraboo Lodge, number 34 of Wisconsin jurisdiction. And after the 7 were all members of the lodge, the petition of the father was received. The Ringling brothers qualified themselves to confer the degrees, were assigned to the several positions in the lodge, received the father into the lodge, and conferred the degrees unto him. End quote. The Baraboo Lodge rooms were above McGann's Furniture, in the building at the northwest corner of Oak and 2nd Avenue, but a new building was in the making. The same month that their father was raised, the Wisconsin State Journal reported that the cornerstone for the Baraboo Masonic Temple was, quote, to be laid with great ceremony that Thursday, the 25th of August, 1891, as per page 1. A formal procession was formed and consisted of the Baraboo Lodges, Eastern Star Chapter, Royal Arch Masons, Knights Templar, Masons, members of the Grand Lodge, the members of the City Council, and led by the Baraboo Military Band. The Baraboo Lodge number 34 received its charter from the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin on June 8, 1852, and early meetings took place in the lodge room of Purdy's building, over at the post office. Stated meetings were the first Wednesday, on or before the full moon in each month. Baraboo Lodge number 34 was almost 4 decades old by the time the Ringlings became members. Besides belonging to Baraboo Lodge number 34, the 7 brothers also belonged to Baraboo Valley Chapter number 49 of the Royal Arch Masons, St. John Commandery number 21 of the Knights Templar of Baraboo, and the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite in Milwaukee. The Ringlings' Masonic affiliation may have provided additional incentive to stage the grand circus spectacle named King Solomon in 1914. By 1914, dozens of Scottish Rite stages had been constructed and held massive scenery collections to stage Scottish Rite degree work. Masonic backdrops depicted private apartments, throne room, courtyard, and the Temple of King Solomon. Scottish Rite bodies with scenery collections were located all across the country. To look at the 61 scenery collections solely produced by Sossman and Landis of Chicago, and Toomey and Volland of St. Louis, from 1896 to 1914, puts it in perspective. These installations included painted scenery for Scottish Rite theaters in dozens of American cities. End quote. It seems we have proven beyond a shadow of doubt that the Masonic education received by the Ringling brothers had a direct influence on their penchant for stagecraft and showmanship. Circuses have long been accused of nightmarish acts, ranging from publicly simulated occult rituals to mass hypnosis and even from harvesting. Allegedly, that is. But don't take it from me. The 4th season of the popular TV show, American Horror Story, was literally set in Jupiter, Florida, and featured all of those themes. The premiere episode attracted a series high of 6.13 million viewers, making it the most viewed episode of the series. It ultimately became FX's most watched program ever, surpassing its previous installment, Coven. The season garnered a total of 20 Emmy Award nominations, the most for any season of American Horror Story to date. It was nominated for no less than 76 awards by various institutions. Public outcry and undercover journalism, revolving the apparent abuse of circus elephants, led to the swift collapse of the Ringling Empire.
They arrived yesterday with 42 cars and 750,000 tons of bags and baggage, much of it alive and hungry. Today was spent rehearsing for tonight's premiere. It's hard to imagine that it takes $4 million to put on this show, but it's true. However, drawing in the crowds isn't something they worry much about.
The key to the success of Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey is every year bringing something brand new that makes you must come and see the circus this year. And that's what I try and do.
Kenneth Feld, following in his father Irvin's footsteps, has kept much of the same flavor of the circus, but has added a lot of new acts, more modern music, and younger performers. 11 countries are represented in the show, including the first Chinese acrobats ever to appear in an American circus. Tonight will continue a tradition started by P.T. Barnum back in 1871, a tradition that still competes in today's modern world of television, video games, and shows of all sorts.
I think it is the greatest show that I've ever seen. I mean, I can sit and watch it performance after performance after performance. I never get tired. I see something different every time.
Next, a case involving alleged spies, animal activists, former CIA agents, and a three-ring circus. This week, Kenneth Feld, the CEO of Ringling Brothers, will take the stand in a civil trial. Ringling Brothers is accused of spying on the animal rights group PETA, or People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which is seeking $1.8 million in damages. Steve Inskeep spoke to NPR's Jack Speer about the case. The circus and the animal activists are longtime antagonists.
PETA accuses Kenneth Feld and the circus company of employing undercover operatives to infiltrate and spy on PETA as well as other animal rights groups. NPR's Jack Speer has been covering this case and joins us.
Good morning, Steve.
So isn't this case based on a 1956 movie? It sounds,
It really does. I mean, this case is something straight out of a John Grisham novel in some ways. There are accusations that go beyond mere spying here. We've actually got court documents that were filed by PETA in this case accusing Ken Feld of running an extensive campaign of dirty tricks, burglary, wiretapping, all part of an effort to undermine the group's activities. According to court documents, and these are documents filed by PETA, this campaign actually began around 1987, lasted for 10 years. Feld hired a private investigator who in turn hired at least 5 people to penetrate these animal rights groups, either as employees or volunteers. And for about 10 years, these people reported back to Feld on what the animal rights organizations were doing.
So where does the CIA come into all of this?
Well, Feld hired a former CIA deputy director as an advisor. Claire George was his name, and George was involved in a campaign to spy on PETA and some of these other animal rights groups.
Okay, so we're waiting for the CEO, Kenneth Feld, to testify in his own defense. The trial obviously has been going on for some time. What's happened so far?
A lot of the evidence is centered around Charles Smith, and he's the former vice president of finance at Ringling Brothers. He basically has defended the actions, saying Ringling Brothers had to do what it did to protect itself and its audiences. There were concerns about radical elements within these groups, which he felt might be prepared to do something terrible. Smith also accused PETA of doing some of the same things it's now suing over, hiring people to pose as willing circus workers so they could get inside these groups and document animal abuse, or what the groups say is abuse. Ringling Brothers, by the way, has said it does not mistreat animals.
This white rope connected to the neck rope is connected to the back left hind leg. It goes over to the left side of her body and is anchored to a stake driven in the ground or guide off to these pipes you see along the side of the paddock. And on Gary's command, he says pull. These guys will yank on that rope and pulls the baby's left leg underneath it, and he pulls down with a hook on the top of its head like so in this picture, and the baby elephant is slammed to the ground. This is a baby elephant that's been pulled from its mother approximately 3 weeks, and it's first time it's been turned loose in 3 weeks, to just for a little walk around the barn to loosen its legs up.
So it's been chained up for 3 weeks straight?
Pretty much. Closely and you'll see another black line. There's a hook on the other end of it stuck in that baby's foot, and that's the lie down sit up. Those are basically the training techniques that Mr. Gary Jacobson uses. A lot of manpower and brute force, a little electricity, a little savage disposition. Of course, this is Ringling's training facility that's all fenced in so nobody from the outside can see in. And rock and roll music plays loud so nobody can hear what's coming out of there.
Oh, that's to cover up the elephant screaming?
Yes, ma'am. Of course, they'll tell you it's just to let them get used to the loud noises and stuff, but we know better. I know better. Hook, you got it. Well, you can't see it. The rope pulling the trunk in between its legs. 2 guys hook poking the baby elephant in the tender spots on top of its hind legs, and Gary's got the tender spot behind its head. So what's an elephant to do but stand on its head?
How many bill hooks are on the elephant right now?
3. This is the training of sitting up on the tub. Now put these ropes that are running, you see them running across the floor. They're guyed out to the bars behind these guys, so its hind legs can't move any way but backwards. They're forcing the elephant backwards. The tub's slid up underneath it so it comfortably sits down. Has no alternative. Unless it wants to face a hot shot or a bull hook.
I know what it's like. That's not the way you treat animals. You really think that that's a good way for an animal to be?
Yes, I think they get excellent care. They live twice as long.
How about if I shackled you in one place, and mind you, you're not even a roaming band of animals. You know, somebody that roams 30, 40 miles a day. You want to take a walk with me down there? Talk? Just okay. Talk. Come on. Last Chance for Animals is doing a typical yearly demonstration when the Ringling Bros Circus came to town. And we were handing out pamphlets, warning people what it was like inside, you know, making them aware, educating them. See, you guys take it to the extreme. You know why, Steve? Because what we're saying makes a lot of sense.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that it makes a lot of sense. Because
the camera?
No, it's not filmed right now.
Oh, good. I don't mind. I was targeted for the surveillance specifically because I was becoming a real problem for Ringling Brothers and Ken Feld. We were really making a difference, and it was starting to cost Ken Feld a lot of money. That's what it comes down to. This is nothing but a big money-making business. They're not in here to help animals.
That's not true. They're out there to protect these animals from becoming extinct. Come on, you know that as well as I do.
Animals from becoming extinct. Why don't they go back out in Africa? You know how many hundreds of thousands of elephants are still left? Why don't they go out there and protect them? But you say that they don't do it for the money. They're doing it. It's nonsense, man. The circus is here for the money. They're here to make money, Steve.
Hey, Chris.
You got some time?
Yeah, good timing now.
Hey, let me ask you. When you investigated me, I laughed at that. We had some laughs on that one, huh?
Yeah, you're right about that.
When you chose me to investigate, why me?
Because you posed a threat to self. You looked at your organization as being one of the larger organizations that threatened and basically the economics of the circus too. I mean, because of the fact too that you're the group leader, you're the one that was seen, you know, out in the public making statements. You had the power to bring in celebrities, and that's a real key issue with Feld. He didn't like how the fact that when the celebrities came out against them, you know, how it looked on TV. You know, when you had everybody from Reuben Granahan to the Arthur there, to the other celebrities, that you had that much pull, and he didn't have that much power when it came to that. Believe me, there was a lot more that went on, but the fact is, too, that, and also, Claire George, you know, he looked at the guys as a threat, too, because he evaluated all the work that I did.
Claire George, who oversaw all of the CIA's spying activities from 1984 to 1987, left the agency after lying to Congress about the Iran-Contra scandal. He went to work in the private sector as a spy for hire. His clients included Halliburton and Ringling Brothers, where he supervised Steve Kendall's covert operations against journalists and animal rights activists like me, Krista Rose.
You said you paid protesters at first, and then in a video, I think if I remember correctly, you said you paid them.
Sure thing. We paid because there weren't enough people that we had as far as organizing demonstrations right away to go to get some money. You have to remember, I was representing an industry. That's how I look at it.
All right.
I mean, I was doing my best for the clients. I was doing my best to protect the circus industry.
So your opinion about how you feel about me when you first met me, and your opinion now has changed. Like right now, your opinion of me is how?
No, I look at you as a good guy. Honestly, I look at you on the right side of the. Even my wife said too. She said, "You know what? You work for the wrong people."
I don't remember if I contacted Steve or he contacted us, but we developed a relationship. Steve has tried to help us when we wanted it, and what I did want to see was the footage. He's given me some stuff that I needed.
What would you do if you saw a guy beating his dog?
I would object to that, and I'd do something about it.
What if you saw the guy beating the elephant over there now?
I would object to that too.
Really?
Yes,
Why
I
don't
would.
you hang? I'll tell you what.
They don't beat those elephants. They'd be fired if they beat those elephants.
Do you really believe that?
Elephants are treated abominably in the circus. In order for them to do these silly tricks, elephants in the wilds do not stand on their heads. They do not stand on beach balls. They don't do these silly tricks that they're trained to do. Now let's understand what training is here. In order for an elephant, a wild animal, a big animal that has a mind of its own, it's an intelligent animal, in order for it to do what we see it doing in a circus, it has to do it under fear and duress. And that means using block and tackle when they're babies, spreading out their legs, beating them constantly, taking the spirit out of an elephant. That's what it means. It means what you don't see in that circus is the horror.
We're back now with that big change coming to the circus. Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey made a surprise announcement today saying it will begin to phase out one of the fixtures of the show for so many years. And by 2018, will no longer use elephants in its show.
We feel that they don't want to see elephants traveling.
Animal rights groups say the decision shows how much attitudes toward animals are changing. Ringling Brothers says its decision was driven in part by a growing number of local ordinances that prevent circuses with exotic animals from coming to town. By 2018, the circus will keep the elephants at its Center for Elephant Conservation in Florida.
We can devote all of our resources to them there, and we don't have to fight legislation.
Ken Feld is not what I would ever call a compassionate man. He may be taking elephants out of the circus now because it's costing them too much money in litigation. He claims to be putting them down on their sanctuary or farm that they have in Florida. It's only because he's going to make money on it down there.
They're going to take their park. They're going to take their elephants, their conservatory where they're supposedly protecting the species, and turn it into a wild animal park. He's going to do the same thing that Disney did. All looks to capitalize on the misfortunes of others. Sure, he'll take in more elephants. From people, great, that's great. He's going to go use them to breed and things like that.
I'm absolutely against breeding elephants in captivity, or any animals for that matter. Ringling Brothers, barbaric circus. It's a barbaric circus. They get rid of the animals and employ people, could be okay. Could be okay.
Please don't attend circuses like Ringling Brothers that continue to exploit animals. I encourage you to see one of the many reputable circuses that do not exploit animals, including Circus Oz, Cirque Eloise, Circus Schmirkus, Circus Vargas, and of course, Circus Olay.
I'd like to say congratulations to the filmmakers who made Tyke Elephant Outlaw. Thank you for telling the world Tyke's tragic story and helping stop the exploitation, abuse, and suffering of circus elephants. To find out more about LCA, you can visit us on our website at lcanimal.org.
So the former CEO of Ringling Brothers is going to get up for what is in effect the ultimate circus performance. You could look at it that way anyway. Is he much of a performer himself?
He comes from a very flamboyant family. His family, in fact, the Feld family, has owned Ringling Brothers for about 40 years now. PETA's lawyer has been presenting document after document in this case to show that Feld was involved in this spy operation. Feld's lawyer, Thomas Cawley, has been reminding jurors that this is a civil case and that the defendant has to show damages and that PETA's membership continued to grow during this period. So he's essentially saying, hey, where's the foul here? And he's also told the jury that the real reason for this lawsuit is that PETA actually wanted publicity.
NPR's Jack Spear, thanks very much.
Steve, you're welcome.
The Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus bills itself as the greatest show on earth, but the drama and action is not limited to 3 rings. Next week, the heirs to the circus fortune will move to a new stage, this federal courthouse in Washington. Karen Feld is suing her brother Kenneth.
It is hard to believe that we could come from the same parents genetically and be so different, and that a brother could do this to his only sister.
Do you have any reactions to your sister's lawsuit?
Karen Feld is seeking $110 million, accusing Kenneth of assault. The dispute centers around an event that took place inside this Washington high-rise. Karen and Kenneth were already at odds when she attended a service for their recently deceased aunt. Karen Feld says she has a seizure disorder. She says she got up to go to the bathroom to compose herself. Karen says security guards then violently dragged her into the hallway as she heard the voice of her brother.
He said, get rid of her. She's not family. Her name is Field, F-I-E-L-D. Get rid of her.
Karen says the men beat her and sexually groped her on the elevator ride to the lobby.
Just as he's treated animals cruelly, he's treated people cruelly in some cases, and I think I'm one of them.
Through his attorney, Feld declined to be interviewed by AP, saying he would make his case in court. In a counterclaim filed with the court, Kenneth Feld responds that during the service, only a few rooms were open to guests, adding that his sister tried to sneak toward a bedroom where family heirlooms and financial documents had been stored. Kenneth says when a guard confronted his sister, she exploded in a rage, began yelling profanities, and threw a glass of wine at him.
I didn't go anywhere that was unauthorized, and there was nowhere unauthorized, and I never got very far anyway.
It will soon be up to a court to settle the sibling dispute in a family known for bringing joy and happiness to millions of other families. Matt Friedman, The Associated Press.
Welcome back. Call it the end of an era or error, depending on who you ask, but the final group of performing Ringling elephants is done with their show days.
And now they're spending their retirement right here in Central Florida. Jake Peterson shows us their new digs in Polk County.
From the spotlight to the sunlight, it's now easy living for this group of 11 newly retired elephant performers.
We call this the Resort for Elephants.
They joined other past pachyderm performers who already call this 200-acre facility in Polk City home. The last performing elephants joined the herd this week.
It's a resort life and a retirement life, so we're going to have to actually play into that. As people, when they retire, they kind of have to find a new hobby, a new lifestyle. We're going to have to watch them closely to make sure they don't get too resort life.
This is the largest herd of Asian elephants in North America, but some animal rights groups believe Ringling needs to relinquish the herd. Ringling disagrees.
We are dedicated to their care and conservation. If we don't do this work, no one else will.
There's meals, vet visits, and of course, playtime. But it's not all about eating and relaxation here. This group of pachyderms will also provide an important function for science.
Elephants have a low incidence of cancer. They have evolved in such a way that they don't get cancer.
So researchers here are working with doctors from all over the country to help figure out how these guys can help humans.
So that's the study that we're providing, is looking at their blood in the laboratory to see the function of that, and then to hopefully find the clue, the secret, to create a magic pill, so to speak, against cancer.
A breeding program will also help ensure the longevity of this endangered animal, an animal that one day could provide a medical breakthrough for humans.
We want to become the mecca of Asian elephant research, to have scientists come and to learn more about them so we can better take care of them.
So even after their final curtain call, this group still finds ways to wow us. Reporting in Polk City, Jake Peterson, ABC Action News.
In March 2015, Ringling Brothers Circus made the historic announcement that it will stop forcing elephants to perform in its circus by 2018. Ringling stated it was the best thing for the elephants to not be in the circus.
It's the best thing for our company, for our associates, and for our consumers, and most of all, for the elephants.
However, Ringling also announced it will retire the elephants to its elephant breeding center in Florida, which is not the best thing for the elephants. For many years, Ringling has used its breeding center to breed baby elephants for the purpose of forcing them to perform circus tricks in the circus. When the baby elephants are about 2 years of age, Ringling uses another elephant to drag the baby kicking and screaming from the mother. Ringling then chains the babies up, sometimes for months on end, to break their spirit, and then forces them to perform circus tricks by tying them up with ropes, beating them with bull hooks, and shocking them with electric shock devices. For their entire lives, after being ripped away from their mothers and family, Ringling continues to beat the elephants with bull hooks, whip them in the face, and chain them up. This is all done for the sole purpose of making money for the Feld family, the owners of Ringling Brothers Circus. Ringling's elephants deserve better than Ringling. They deserve to be free from the very people that have been abusing them, their family members, and their friends for years. The elephant should not have to spend one more day with the people who do the most horrendous things to them behind closed doors. The following comparison between the elephant sanctuary in Tennessee and Ringling's breeding center in Florida reveals that Ringling's breeding center is a hellhole for elephants, and the elephant sanctuary is a heaven for elephants. Ringling's breeding center in Florida is 200 acres, but the elephants do not have free access to it because they are separated and confined in pens, paddocks, and barns. Although the outdoor pens and paddocks vary in size, they are all flat, they're all barren, and they're all boring. Note the elephant swaying in this pen, an abnormal stereotypic behavior caused by the stress, frustration, and boredom of confinement. By contrast, the elephant sanctuary provides Asian elephants with 2,400 acres of Tennessee wilderness, which they have free access to 24 hours a day, except in inclement weather. The environment is large, it is wild, and it is interesting. It also has varied substrates, from flat to hilly, which are conducive to elephant foot and joint health. At Ringling's breeding center, bull hooks, a weapon resembling a fireplace poker, along with chains, ropes, and electric shock devices, are used to control, dominate, and train the elephants. Because the elephant sanctuary does not dominate, control, or force the elephants to do anything against their will, bullhooks and other weapons are not necessary. Instead, if the sanctuary desires a certain behavior, they use positive rewards, such as treats, as the person on the left is doing, so the person on the right can cut a chain off of Billy's foot, a remnant from Billy's previous life in the circus. The elephants at the sanctuary are free to do as they choose. At Ringling's breeding center, the elephants are locked inside and chained for 15 hours a day. Almost 2/3 of every day, the elephants are chained in place, where they can't even turn around. Being chained causes the elephants to sway and rock back and forth, which is an abnormal, stereotypic behavior resulting from the extreme boredom, frustration, and stress of being confined, in this case, being severely confined. At the elephant sanctuary, the elephants are never chained and are free day and night to come and go, inside or out, as they choose. At Ringling's breeding center, despite the bonds between family or friends, Ringling decides which elephants will spend their time and days together. The elephants have no choice in the matter because they are locked up in pens or paddocks. And despite the very social nature of elephants, the baby and young elephants are locked away from others of similar age. To compensate for the boredom caused by lack of playmates, Ringling provides the young elephants with plastic toys. However, these toys are no substitute for real playmates, as this video from Save Elephants Foundation in Thailand shows. At the elephant sanctuary, the elephants are free to choose who they will spend their time with. This means that elephants from Ringling can be reunited with their family members or friends. Mothers can be reunited with their babies, and babies with their mothers. Siblings can be reunited with their siblings. Or they can choose to make new friends. The young elephants will have other young elephants to play with. They will have 2,400 acres of wilderness with ponds to swim and play in. This is a place where elephants of every age can be free to be elephants. At Ringling's breeding center, they do not provide the elephants with free access to water. They are only given water twice a day, in the morning and afternoon. If the elephants are thirsty, due to the heat and humidity in Florida, they have to wait until Ringling decides to give them water. Additionally, although elephants love to bathe and swim as it cools them off and is an essential physical activity, there are no ponds for the elephants to swim or bathe in. Instead, the elephants have to depend on Ringling to spray them off with hoses. The closest an elephant gets to swimming at Ringling Center is being sprayed with a hose, given a tub of water, or a muddy patch of dirt. It is just the opposite at the elephant sanctuary. Elephants have access to water all day and can quench their thirst whenever they want. Moreover, they have ponds to swim and play in, a necessity for their health and well-being. At Ringling's breeding center, the elephants are never free. Their movements are controlled and managed by people with bullhooks, the same people who have been abusing these elephants for years. When they are not in pens, there is always someone controlling them with a bullhook. When they are being walked across the fields, the elephants are forced to hold each other's tails, which elephants hate because it painfully tears the hair out of the ends of their tails. Even out in this open field, you can see the handler using the bullhook under the elephant's chin. By contrast, at the elephant sanctuary in Tennessee, elephants are given the freedom 24 hours a day to manage their own lives and make their own choices. Choices about where they want to go, who they want to hang out with, when they want to go swimming, drink water, or bathe, when they want to be inside, when they want to be outside. After years of being chained, beaten, and forced to perform circus tricks, Ringling's elephants deserve better than more dominance, more control, more chains, and more beatings by Ringling. They deserve to live free.
Feld Entertainment is expected to quietly close its Center for Elephant Conservation. First, it removed the elephant acts from their shows, then the Greatest Show on Earth ended this spring, and now due to mounting expenses from its 200-acre Indian elephant retirement home, PETA says the CEC will now close too. According to the Herald Tribune, Feld spokeswoman Lisa Taylor said, quote, "What I could tell you is the CEC is still open and the elephants are still there. However, Feld's CEC website is not functioning and has apparently been down for weeks." Ringling circus elephants were put out the pasture with great fanfare in May 2016 after pressure from animal activists forced Feld to end the elephants' acts and played a big role in the closing of the 146-year-old Greatest Show on Earth.
It is my pleasure to introduce Kenneth Feld, who is the chairman and CEO of Feld Entertainment, and Juliet Feld, who is Feld Entertainment's Chief Operating Officer.
We have seen a downward trend in attendance over 10 years, and because Ringling Brothers is so close to our heart and because we are a privately held company, we really made every effort possible to change this trend. And last year, after we retired the elephants from the touring units, we saw a much steeper drop in sales. And we monitored that through the through the rest of the year. And when we looked at the ticket sales from last year and then what we were seeing in advance sales this year, it led us to this decision. We're no longer able to see this as a sustainable business model.
Of course, we're sad, and it was a very difficult decision to make. But we look at the entirety of it. We look at what the future is, and as Juliet said, it's not a sustainable business model. So we have to put all that into the mix. There's a lot of people involved that it impacts, and people that, in many cases, I've known for almost 50 years. So it's definitely sad. Our company, today, we're in a lot of businesses. An example is this past weekend, we had 26 tours around the world. 2 of them were Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey. The rest were either Disney on Ice, Marvel Universe Live, Supercross, Arena Cross, and so it's and Monster Jam just down the road here is one of them. So the company is a robust company. We're always looking at new entertainment, and we are a company that looks to the future. We look ahead, we always have. And Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey is an important and a great part and it is the future until May, and then it will be part of our glorious past.
Well, it's one of the first names you think of when it comes to the circus, right? But today, for the last time ever, Ringling Brothers is performing in Orlando.
Yes, the circus will end its greatest show on earth in this spring. High operating costs and the decline in ticket sales made the business hard to run. Before taking the final bow, Ringling will perform 30 shows across the U.S. between now and May. The final performance in Orlando is happening in less than 30 minutes at the Amway. The circus will take the stage at 1 this afternoon. At last check, there were just a handful of tickets left. We'll have much more on the final days of Ringling Brothers on News 6.
A big part of what many of us knew as the greatest show on earth is being retired to the First Coast. 30 Asian elephants, many of them former circus performers, will be coming to live at White Oak Conservation in Nassau County. Most of the elephants coming are from the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. White Oak Conservation in the Yulee area is building a 2,500-acre habitat for the elephants. Ringling Brothers originally retired them to Polk County in 2016 when it permanently ended elephant circus acts. White Oak's Michelle Gadd says the elephants will be transported with their social groups.
So once the state-of-the-art veterinary supplies and barns are ready for them, all the hydrology that's involved for these, they're going to have 11 different water holes available to them.
White Oak hopes the first group of Ringling Brothers elephants will arrive in Yulee early next year. Bill Bortsfield, WJCT News, 89.9. The first herd of 12 Asian elephants that were formerly circus performers has arrived at White Oak Conservation in Yulee. The 12 female elephants that have already arrived range from 8 to 38 years old. They previously performed with Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. The circus ended its use of elephants in 2017. 20 more former circus elephants will be arriving at the refuge for rare species in Nassau County as soon as additional areas of their new forest habitat are completed. To get to White Oak, the elephants were moved 200 miles in pairs in customized trucks, accompanied by their animal care specialists. At White Oak, their habitat is large enough that they can choose to stay near the barn and their human caregivers, or wander in the woods, wallow in the mud, or swim in the pond. White Oak's new elephant group has been socialized together for the past several months and includes 2 sets of full sisters and numerous half-sisters.
Retired elephants that used to perform for the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus are moving into an exclusive gated community. As Manuel Bajorquez shows you, the animals that were once confined are now adapting to their new home right here in Florida.
Just south of the Florida-Georgia line, a herd of gentle giants now roams. They are as big as they are majestic. Members of the largest Asian elephant herd in the Western Hemisphere and retirees from the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. Earlier this spring, they were shipped here, their lush new habitat at the White Oak Conservation Center. For conservationist Michelle Gadd, it's a dream come true.
A lot of kids have this dream of running away to be and joining the circus, and I was the kid that wanted to run away and let all the animals out of the circus.
Elephant attractions were a part of Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus for most of its 146-year history. But in 2016, Ringling finally retired the act after years of public outcry against what many considered animal cruelty. But their retirement wasn't perfect. They were moved to this small preserve south of Orlando. So last fall, the nonprofit Walter Conservation stepped in and bought the 35 elephants and started construction on the habitat. These were their first baby steps into their new home, finally able to roam and feed and bond as a herd, and even cool off when the Florida sun becomes a bit too much.
Elephants are among the most social and empathetic animals there are, and here not only are they getting to know their new surroundings, they're getting to better know each other.
The 2 oldest girls, I refer to them as the mean girls, but perhaps they're just a little bit bossy.
So this is their first time really interacting as a herd.
It's the first time interacting as a herd. They seem to have sorted out a hierarchy amongst themselves. They regrouped right outside the fence and again reassured each other, rumbled, touched each other, put their trunks in one another's mouths.
Nick Newby leads the White Oak Elephant Project and works with the animals every day. He knows them all by name, even if they're only showing their backsides.
Angelica, Sarah, Mabel, Myrtle.
Newby says because they have been raised and trained and become dependent on humans, sending them into the wild is not an option. But here, he hopes they can help humans better understand and appreciate this endangered species, of which only about 50,000 remain.
So what is your mission for them here?
Just for them to live a holistic life and a really complete life. The best thing for these animals is to live in a complex environment that's pretty darn close to the wild, honestly.
This is as wild and free as they can be.
I believe so, yes.
We want people to realize that elephants are beautiful just as they are. They don't need to be ridden or trained or do tricks or travel the world. Just let them be where they are, and you don't get anything more beautiful than that.
A beautiful retirement for sure. Now, while there are possible plans for a viewing area around that habitat, White Oak has not decided whether the elephants will be part of public tour.
New tonight, the Humane Society of the United States goes undercover in Florida. This is video the organization shot and is now sharing with us. They say it shows stores across the state selling ivory. Our Julie Solomon walks us through what they found, and she speaks to local animal experts about how this trade is actually putting elephants across the world now at risk.
Video shot by the Humane Society of the United States shows a wildlife biologist undercover visiting numerous cities looking for ivory in stores across the state of Florida.
It's kind of wavy. Oh, got you. Okay, so this is ivory. Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of wavy.
The Humane Society says the investigation took place in February and revealed more than 350 items for sale suspected to be carved from elephant ivory.
The pieces, which include napkin holders, trinkets, ivory necklace, earrings, bracelets, cigarette holder, you name it. Some of them were labeled ivory, some of them were labeled bone, some of them didn't have a label.
The investigator visited stores across the state, including Tampa, Largo, and Clearwater.
It is hard to find ivory anymore.
It is?
Because it's illegal.
Ivory is kind of hard to sell. You have to have a paper trail.
Oh, okay, okay.
Because it's illegal.
The Humane Society of the United States says during the investigation, sellers were unable to produce documentation verifying age and origin of ivory, which is necessary to determine if the items were imported in violation of federal law.
In the U.S., under federal law, it is illegal to import, export, or sell ivory across state lines because elephant populations are dwindling, because it's extremely cruel to source this ivory.
The Humane Society of the United States would like to see more states implement a state law banning the intrastate trading of ivory, meaning prohibiting sales within the state. Currently, 13 states have a similar law. Florida is not one of them. Julia Brerin with the Mayaca Elephant Ranch in Manatee County says most of the poaching happens in Africa. Elephants are killed for ivory and its tusks, putting the entire population at risk.
As long as people keep purchasing ivory products, such as jewelry, ornaments, statues, the legal market will continue the poaching. So that's why the importance is so high about raising awareness and educating others.
Animal advocates urge people to learn more about the endangered species, saying a trinket is not worth extinction. Julie Solomon, ABC Action News.
Greatest show on earth is coming back to the big top. Ringling Brothers and Barnum & Bailey have reimagined the iconic franchise, including the live show, products, and behind-the-scenes documentary. Feld Entertainment says the show will engage the audience to make each performance a unique experience. The tour will visit more than 50 cities in North America, starting in the fall of 2023. Auditions are already underway for the next cast of Circus sensations.
You won't be seeing elephants, tigers, or lions, but after a 7-year break, Feld Entertainment is back and betting on a reimagined version of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. Joining us right now is Kenneth Feld. He's the CEO of Feld Entertainment. Good morning to you. Good
morning.
So I grew up on the circus. I did, and it's politically incorrect to say, but I enjoyed the elephants a lot as a child. I just want to say
animals, right?
Loud and proud. So what are you doing now?
What we're doing, we've relaunched Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey, and we are opening in Brooklyn tonight at Barclays. And the show is completely different. It is reimagined for audiences today and tomorrow.
What does that mean?
It means that the scale is larger than ever. And when you go in and you look at what we have, it's different. So you're not going to go in and think a preconceived idea. It's so different. And it's really like the ultimate playground. And we have performers, 75 performers from 18 different countries. And what they're doing is extraordinary. And what we want is people in today's world to have simple fun. And that's what this is. We're non-lingual, everybody can enjoy it, and it creates a conversation on the way home. And that's the beauty of it. And the new Ringling, the pace is great, the acts are extraordinary, the performers, and it's something that is inspiring, I think, for young kids, that people can do all this stuff, and it's amazing, and it gives them hope.
So this is more, how much more of this is now, this is more human stunt-based than anything else? Is that a fair thing to say? You probably don't like that to say
but
that
it's
in the
more than just that.
It's
The sense of humor. It's the feeling. It's an excitement, and it doesn't exist anyplace else. That's the key. That it's unique. When you go into Ringling, you can't. There's nothing else like it, and that's true today in this reimagined thing. And the way we've done it, people are excited. I mean, since the beginning of the year, we've played not just with Ringling, but all of our stuff. People want to go out. It's between 500,000 and over 1 million people every single week since the beginning of the year.
Clowns are okay, aren't they?
Humor is good.
No clowns?
No, they are comedians. They are funny people.
Oh my
doing
God, are
funny
clowns
things.
canceled? Why did clowns get canceled? Because of John
No,
Wayne
because they
Gacy
don't
or
want to
something?
scare people with white, crazy makeup and red noses and things like that.
People with white, crazy makeup and red noses and things like that. People with white, crazy makeup and
red noses and things like that. So,
and then I was thinking you could do dogs, couldn't you? Dogs are happy to be doing those tricks. Or
we do have a dog. We have a robotic dog.
Well, then just
Elephants in Florida were so prevalent in the 1920s that legend tells of a statute in Sarasota, which clarifies that they are also subject to parking meters. Another variation goes that an elephant tied to a parking meter in downtown Sarasota, the owner is not liable for accidental injury of passerbys. Though this particular law may just be legend, there is a real ordinance in Coral Gables, Section 4-414, Part H, which was enacted in an effort to, quote, combat the circus atmosphere, which Miami was fostering at that time. As with Sarasota, significant portions of Miami Beach were quite literally constructed by elephants. The following comes to us from The Incomplete History of Elephants in Miami by Nathaniel Sandler. Quote, Carl Fisher, the man who built Miami Beach, understood people's attraction to the pachyderms. Equal parts Tony Goldman and P.T. Barnum, a sort of frontiersman/showman. Fisher looked across Biscayne Bay at seemingly useless Barrier Island and saw something greater than a mess of mangrove and crocodiles. Miami Beach, he began to call it. When the first of his elephants, named Carl II, arrived in 1921, Fisher claimed he was, quote, going to get $1 million worth of advertising out of this elephant. Found in a letter to John Oliver Lagorce, then association editor of National Geographic magazine in Washington, D.C. The quote is often thought to be about Rosie, Miami's most famous elephant. And though the $1 million number can't really be quantified, Fisher's elephant was effective, showing up in countless magazines and newspapers across the country. Carl II was photographed with then-President-elect Warren G. Harding, holding his golf clubs as a cutesy caddy. The elephant was working, except Carl II was a bit unruly. Soon thereafter his trainer quit, worrying that Carl II was too dangerous for the public. A black gardener named Aaron Yarnell took over. He had shown some skill with mules, and it was only meant to be an interim gig, as Fisher felt he needed an exotic trainer from the east to add to the mystique of his elephant. Lagorce began helping him import a mahout from Ceylon, whom they refer to as an elephant chambermaid. The incident becomes increasingly bizarre, as the man Lagorce is using as a broker, Mr. Salih, an Indian gem merchant, was accused of polygamy at Ellis Island. When the bureaucratic tape rips and Sally's mahout finally arrives, Carl II rejects him, preferring Yarnell. Photographs show Yarnell caught in a bizarre racial compromise, dressed as an Eastern mystic. Around 2 years later, Rosie the elephant shows up. Soon thereafter, Carl II, renamed Nero, is finally deemed a danger to the public, and sent to a zoo up north. Even today, many of the things Carl II did are attributed to Rosie. Legends remain unclear about which elephant did what, though we do know both entertained and both worked, clearing the brush on Miami Beach when needed. Carl II, or Nero, and Rosie are found in countless publicity stills from the time, with swimsuit girls, kids, or clearing the land, always with Yarnell by their side. In the archives, there are several tersely written notes in which Fisher demands appearances at churches and auditoriums around town, with other letters coming in requesting the elephant's presence. Quote, "Mr. Fisher, can you please send Rosie to the Easter egg hunt?" In 1920s Miami, elephants also functioned as publicity and outreach. Rosie, who lived on Miami Beach until 1932, when she was sold to an Atlanta zoo, once made an appearance at a bank opening to, quote, "make a deposit." Pictures flashed, people cheered, and at some point, Rosie nervously left her droppings all over the bank floor. People reportedly ran from the bank quite chaotically. Section 4-414H of the Coral Gables Zoning Code still delineates a ban on the keeping of elephants. Former president of the Coral Gables Bar Association, Jane Moyer, in an interview with WLRN, suggests the law is a direct reaction to Fisher and his elephants.
We got Queenie when she was just a baby. She was probably 6 months old. We don't know for sure because she was imported from Thailand, Siam. And so we got her at a pet store in New York City. And I was just 9 years old and Queenie was approximately 6 months old. So we grew up together, literally grew up together. And she stayed with us until 1967 when we sold her because my dad had passed away, I had gotten married, moved away, and it just wasn't fair to her to just be standing around doing nothing. So we grew up together. We were best buddies. And before I got out of school, let me back up. In the winter of 58 and 59, we lived up in Callahan, Florida. I was in high school up there. My dad was down here with Queenie and the other animals that we had that did circus acts. So I would come down on the weekends. But the next winter, I didn't go to regular school at all. I just took correspondence courses. And in fact, used the side of the pool to do my studying, my biology and my U.S. history or whatever I was studying at the time. Much to the dismay of the kids back home, had to go to school every day. But anyway, when I was down here, for the most part, I would ski with Queenie. And then we would also perform like they do still today, although not so much with elephants. But we would perform in the circus and do a circus act, if you will, here. We had a circus ring set up, and we not only had Queenie that I worked with, but we had llamas that did a liberty drill. We had miniature Sicilian donkeys and a dog and 2 monkeys that did your typical dog and pony show, as they call it. And we had a zebra that did what's called a pick-out act. And in that situation, there would be a rack with numbers on it from 0 to 9. And they were like wooden tabs. And on the top of the wooden tab would be like a webbing that the zebra could pick up in its teeth. And so when either my dad or the other lady that we worked with worked that act, she would ask kids in the audience to give 2 numbers that add up to no more than 9. So the kids would holler out, 4 and 4. And so Mrs. Ray would say to the zebra, "Now did you get that?" And the zebra would go like this and would circle around and stop and pick up number 8. So, and then they would do a subtraction and things like that. So the people in the audience thought the zebra was really pretty smart.
Could you tell us about Queenie's temperament and intelligence, being that you had such a close relationship with her?
Well, any elephant is a very social creature. And because she and I had such a close bond, it was like at times we were inseparable. Eventually, as I got older and moved away and got married, I would come back to our zoo to see Queenie, and I'd open the door to the barn, because this would be in the winter and she'd have to be in where it was warmer. I would call out her name and she'd trumpet and carry on because she was so excited to see me. But when I was growing up with her, if I was sad about something, she could sense it. And maybe I had a fight with my little boyfriend from 5th grade or whatever, and I'd be crying. So Queenie would go like this with her trunk, and you know, it was like to say, okay, it'll be okay. And you know, she had moods too. She would be silly and giddy and crazy at times, and other times she'd be kind of sad. But very intelligent, very social animal.
How old were you when you started the act with Queenie?
Well, I was 9 when we got her, and so I was probably 11 or 12, because I was so small. My dad didn't think that I had strength enough or was big enough to work with Queenie, because mind you, when she and I performed, I wasn't just a girl in the show for the glitz and the glamour. I was the one telling her what to do. Even when, excuse me, even when we would do different mounts, whereby she would pick me up, or I would, I even did a headstand on the top of her head, but it was just she and I. No man, no other person was anywhere near us. In fact, half the time my dad wasn't even standing on the sidelines. He was off doing something else. So, you know, if we didn't have that close of a bond, I don't think I would have been able to do that, because for the most part, if you're fortunate enough to ever see another elephant in a circus, you'll see that it's usually a man that's directing the elephants, and the girls are just there for the styling, as they call it. Yeah.
Did you do a ring show? Was that a paid show, that the special show that you had, the circus, with the monkeys and the trained dog and everything?
We did that here.
Yeah.
Did you say, was it a paid?
Yeah. Was it separate, or was that part of just the
No, it was
Springs?
all part of.
Oh, it was a free
people,
freebie. It was
yeah,
a free show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all part of what they got to enjoy when they came to the Springs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, back when I was here, it was a privately owned corporation. You know, it wasn't state-owned. But it's so wonderful that the state has taken the initiative to put funding into it, because this, like Silver Springs, you know, who knows what ever would have become of this place in Silver Springs had the state not stepped in. But the best part of my story of Queenie, though, is when we were separated for 38 years and we got back together.
Read that.
And she absolutely remembered me. And I saw her like 5 times after, well, 4 more times after that first time that we were reunited. And every time that I would go back to see her again, there was just that much more bonding.
Yeah.
The last time that I saw her, I'm not really paying that much attention to her, but she's standing there with her leg out. And the gal who was there at Wild Adventures, where Queenie ended up, she says, "Oh my goodness, Liz, look at Queenie's leg." Well, what she was doing was reaching out to me to touch me, and I wasn't paying any attention to her. Then, of course, I put my leg out too. The interesting thing is, the day that we sold Queenie, the hired man that we had that was excellent with her, she was doing the same thing to him. And I never put the two together until I went back into one of my old scrapbooks, dug out some old pictures, and sure enough, Queenie's doing that to him. And it's like, don't leave me, you know, I need your comfort. Stay close to me. So.
It's a sweet story.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish she were here today. But I do have a part of her with me. It's probably not going to be picked up on the video, but the white in the middle is a piece of her tusk from when she was a little baby.
Oh, that's lovely.
And the sterling silver elephant that's in the middle, my sister-in-law had given me that probably 40 years ago, and I always wore it. But I didn't want to wear two pendants, so I went to my local goldsmith, and he created, between he and I collaborating, he created this. And it's probably really hard to see, but there's some black around the edge in the gold. It's embedded in the gold. That's a piece of hair from Queenie's tail.
Oh my goodness, really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
You can always keep her close to you.
Absolutely.
That is very special.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
That's a real unique twist on a childhood pet, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and how many kids that have grown up with an animal can go back and visit it when they've got kids of their own, and you know.
Yeah.
All my kids got to see her. My grandkids all got to see her.
Wonderful.
And of course my husband saw her when he and I first met. And then we revisited her. Well, he went twice, I think, up to Valdosta with me to see her. So, how I wish she was here today, because I miss an elephant
I've got
hug.
tears in my eyes.
It's not always about the physical elephant, particularly in Miami. Symbols abound in the subtropics. The old Miami arena used to be occasionally called the pink elephant, because it was a figurative white elephant, something annoying to own, yet still valuable, that underwent a thick pink coat of paint. Pink elephants are an appropriate symbol for Miami, since most of the city is covered in the deco-fashionable hue, and seeing pink elephants, or hallucinations brought on by drinking, is South Beach's logical conclusion. On West Dixie Highway and 150th Street, in the far eastern side of the Southern Memorial Cemetery, a massive cartoonish statue of an elephant sits flanked by two male lions, dark manes and mouths agape. The statue was erected by the Miami Showmen's Association, a social group for carnival workers in the 1940s that still exists today. The elephant's eyes stare blankly, its trunk curled mid-performance, beckoning to the cheering crowds. But the elephant only looks over the dead, countless silent gravestones and markers. A woolly mammoth femur sits heavily in the curious vault of the Patricia and Philip Frost Museum of Science, browning with tens of thousands of years of age." End quote. There is a hotel and resort complex in Miami Beach by the name of Faina, located at the corner of Collins Avenue and 32nd through 33rd Street, which features on display a $25 million gold-plated mammoth skeleton encased inside a protective shield. After all we have covered in this presentation, I truly believe this to be the cherry on top of our Atlantean elephant conspiracy theory. For those unaware, the Collins family is among the wealthiest and most influential families in recent history. They are often listed among the so-called 13 elite Illuminati bloodlines. The regional variations of the Collins dynasty would include the Cohen, the Colonna, and the Cologne, the original surname of Christopher Columbus, from whom we get the names Columbian Mammoth and Columbian Mastodon. The Collins were instrumental in the development of Miami Beach. The numbers 32 and 33 are evocative of the highest degree of Freemasonry and its subsequent honorary degree. As we mentioned earlier, the Ringling brothers were all Freemasons. The name Faina is the Catalan word for a series of final passes leading to the kill made by the matador in a bullfight, or in our case, a mammoth fight, as male mammoths are also classified as bulls by academics. The same artist is also responsible for the creation of a golden unicorn sculpture, also on the premises. Unicorns have also long been associated with the mythical Atlantis. The following comes to us from the official Faina website. Quote, "The mammoth belongs to a kingdom that is neither fantastic nor pure animal. It belongs to the history of our ancestors, to which we call extinction, but can never fully understand because we never saw it with our eyes. So we classify the mammoth in a fickle place between mythology and science, in that kingdom of unlikely wonders that could only possibly dwell in the past. And even if we have the testimony of mammoth bones in natural history museums, its existence is as unlikely as its disappearance. Now, if we were to add a unicorn horn to the mammoth skeleton, we would have the missing magical element that would place it in that kingdom of archetypes and magical animals, and extinction stops forever. That's what English artist Damien Hirst did in 2014, with gold. His sculpture, Gone But Not Forgotten, is the impressive skeleton of a woolly mammoth, standing 3 meters tall, plated in 24-karat gold, and protected in a colossal glass vitrine with gold framing. The piece is a part of the Natural History series, which began in 1990 with the now famous shark preserved in formaldehyde. But this mammoth in particular was donated by the artist to help the American Foundation for AIDS Research in the fight against HIV, and was sold for £8.9 million. If we pause here, I would like to familiarize you a bit more with the pop artist Damien Hirst. Other high-profile creations of his would include the bedazzled skull of an infant entitled For Heaven's Sake, and an anatomical cross-section of a pregnant woman titled Virgin Mother, just to name a few. It is unclear just how much of the artist's sculptures are comprised of actual corpses. Take, for example, his platinum cast of a real 18th century skull belonging to a 35-year-old man, encrusted with flawless diamonds. Though the skull is said to be a cast, the teeth are in fact the original human teeth. The work's title was supposedly inspired by Hirst's mother, who once asked, quote, "For the love of God, what are you going to do next?" Hirst also seems rather obsessed with bulls and slaughter, and thus we find another link to the name Faina. He was once described as an incredible businessman by Marina Abramovich, and though we are all guilty of using words beyond their precise definitions, the word incredible actually means unbelievable, unsubstantiated, or untrustworthy. Despite his work being bereft of talent, Hirst has been formally accused of plagiarism no less than 16 times, and it may be this lack of credibility which Abramovich was referring to. As if that weren't ugly enough, on the 10th of September 2002, on the eve of the first anniversary of the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks, Hirst commented the following in an interview with the BBC News Online, quote, "The thing about 9/11 is that it's kind of like an artwork in its own right. It was wicked. But it was devised in this way for this kind of impact. It was devised visually. You've got to hand it to them, on some level, because they've achieved something which nobody would have ever thought possible, especially to a country as big as America. So on one level, they kind of need congratulating, which a lot of people shy away from, which is a very dangerous thing." End quote. The next week, following public outrage at his remarks, he issued a statement through his company, Science Limited, quote, "I apologize unreservedly for any upset I have caused, particularly to the families of the victims of the events on that terrible day," end quote. We resume from the Faina website. perhaps only Hearst, who has been the great synthesizer of pop art, punk, scientific anatomy, and aggressiveness, could have concocted these two species to create such a mythological beast. Now we know that adding an alicorn to anything is enough to give it a fantastical aura. But when added to a mammoth, magical by itself due to its extinction and its scale, it then stops being an extinct animal to become part of the legendary, which is always eternal. In that regard, Hearst says, the mammoth comes from a time and place that we cannot ever fully understand. Despite its scientific reality, it has attained an almost mythical status, and I wanted to play with these ideas of legend, history, and science by gilding the skeleton and placing it within a monolithic gold tank. It's such an absolute expression of mortality, but I've decorated it to the point where it's become something else. I've pitched everything I can against death to create something more hopeful. It is gone, but not forgotten. End quote.
I'm here at the Faina Hotel in Miami, Florida, with a beautiful gold leaf mammoth sculpture created by Damien Hirst. This irreplaceable piece of art is valued at over $25 million.
Over $25 million.
And practically sits right on the sand in South Beach. Because of the location, the sculpture is vulnerable to inclement weather, including potential hurricanes. Armor Screen was brought in to design a custom protection system that could be deployed at a moment's notice. Our design team created this superstructure to completely envelop the sculpture and protect it from the elements. Next time you're in South Beach, stop by the Faina Hotel and check this out. And if you have a business, residence, or a $25 million mammoth, call Armor Screen for a custom solution that's perfect for you.
On the topic of elephants, make sure to check out Florida's #1 metaphysical book and crystal store, The Dancing Elephant in Palm Beach County. You just might find me there at work. If you're not in the area, go use the code OWF at dancingelephant.shop for 10% off.
The premiere of this video coincides with the release of Monad, the debut publication of Gallo Glass Books, which is operated from the Dancing Elephant. Monad is a compendium of philosophical writings by three major Neoplatonist philosophers, Plotinus, Porphyry, and Proclus. The most accurate and potent translations of the Neoplatonists were done by Thomas Taylor in the early 1800s, and we have made those translations available in a new hardcover edition, limited to 2,000 copies. This book is an 800-page hardcover behemoth featuring an introduction by the one and only Ken Wheeler, with cover art by Benjamin A. Veerling, and a frontispiece by Cuba Sokolsky. Copies can be purchased for a discounted price of $50 during our pre-sale, to be found at galloglassbooks.shop.
I think that you do, in reality, what Sam and I try to do in the movies, in the theater. That's why we connect. Faina Miami, it's like a movie. It's a movie, but it's real.
Yes, a movie that will live forever.
Our story really begins with the search for the mythical fountain of youth, but what is found instead is a land called
La Florida. In Spanish means flower. It's a land of flowers and dreams. It's a place of new beginnings.
Natural place to be dreaming, to create.
To take a dream and to make it happen.
You go to 1947 and you have George Sachs, and he has a dream too. Out of this fertile place, he creates the first ever luxury hotel, the Saxony.